This is like when it's like quick. All right.
Yeah, this is there's a thematic. We have a very thematic
English,
thing
motherfucker,
that.
do you speak it?
There's a very thematic thing.
Do you speak
Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Reaction, your weekly source for independent commentary on cultural news and politics, where it's always our mission to give you the tools you need to cut through media misdirection and resist the mono narrative. We're so glad to have you join us today. If you are joining us for the first time, or the second time, or many times, please do like, follow, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and leave us a review if you're listening elsewhere on the internet. We'd like to thank our members. We have a new supporter, Justin, who's just joined us. Justin, thank you so much for your support of this show. We could not do it without you. If you would like to be cool like Justin, please do go to humanreactionpod.com, where you can find all the ways to support us. You can buy our merch there. We have an awesome selection of merch. It's actually really just 2 items, but they're great. Made by our friends over at Revved Up Promo. Thanks to Kellen and the team over there for doing that for us. David, what are we talking about today?
This week we have Geezer Fight 2.0, Trump versus Biden, setting up their time to gum each other to death.
I don't know. I think you should check the phrasing on that one.
And like gumming.
I think you should check the phrasing on that.
Are we not saying phrasing anymore?
The NatCons in Europe have a rough week, to say the least. Meme magic is back, baby. Buy, sell, lulz.
Oh, you're talking about MemeStonks?
Yeah,
Oh,
MemeStonks.
sweet.
GameStonks, so back.
GameStonks, so back.
We're so back.
So the new woke Assassin's Creed drops.
Greed?
Nice.
ESG is not dead. We got some interesting stuff on there. We've been kind of talking about the Gamergate 2.0 stuff, how it's been happening. That narrative continues, and we got an interesting update on that. And then in our OnlyFans, only members, talking about Harrison Butker. So he's a kicker named Butker. All right. He did a commencement
Are we not saying
speech.
phrasing anymore?
Exactly. Commencement speech where he broke all the rules and other issues, including King Charles and a documentary filmmaker who was debanked for trying to make a film about Governor Whitmer's kidnapping case.
You don't talk
But to
shit.
get access to that, you got to join like Justin and become a member.
That's right. You don't talk shit about the FBI. That much we know, right, Kyle?
No, yeah, you end up getting your entire digital identity erased, right? Right. But where you won't get erased is at our Discord.
Well played. I see what you did there.
Where you can share news stories with us. Members have their own special chat inside the Discord as well, and you can laugh along with us with these great memes, like one that JRC in the Discord dropped us, with Grandma handing you a birthday card with cash from Aunt Sue, and then the DOJ arresting you because she doesn't have a money transmitter license.
What did Grandma ever do to deserve that? You
She
know?
transferred money without a license.
This is a cryptocurrency reference. Is that what it is?
Yeah. But I mean, just in general, like any form of money transfer of like being in an official status, you need a license for in America. You have to be like accredited for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which just goes right back to the thing we've been talking about in past episodes about financial censorship and you know, this slowly tightening noose around your financial privacy and your freedom to transact voluntarily with people that you want to transact with.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely do join the Discord. Share memes with us. The private chat, I have to mention this is so good. The private chat for the members is called the Skiff, appropriately. A place where you go, a secret room where you go, and then you come out with different ideas. So
1776 will commence again.
it's a lot of fun.
It's where you get Mike Johnson.
Yeah.
Phrasing 3 times in the intro. Wow.
We're there.
All right, David,
All right.
let's kick it off.
Start the clock, Joe. Don't forget about that. You didn't start the clock.
Start the clock.
Yeah. I have no idea how long we've been going. We're in a whole new
Hours
place.
now.
Could have been an hour at this
That's
point.
what
I
she
don't know.
said. All right, so
I black out every time we do this.
If you are a small business owner looking for exponential growth, you have to connect with Adam Thuen at Intellectual Patriots. He will revolutionize your business game and help you get to the next level. Adam can streamline your business practices and advertising strategies to improve your bottom line. His expertise in data engineering means he can build you the systems you need to collect and analyze market data. His mission is to provide you with invaluable insights to fuel your success. From grant writing and business proposals to digital systems integrations, even AI management, Intellectual Patriots is a one-stop shop for cutting-edge solutions. Don't wait another second. Visit intelpatriots.com to learn more. That's INTEL Patriots.com. This episode is brought to you by Revved Up Promo, the official apparel partner of Human Reaction. Revved Up is a premier full-service shop specializing in laser engraving, screen printing, and embroidery. Not only are they now making all of our apparel right down the road from us, they can do the same for your brand and ship it to you anywhere in the world. Revved Up helps you navigate the extensive universe of merch options and uses state-of-the-art techniques to showcase your brand in its very best light. So if you want to support our show and our generous sponsor, you can now do so by buying our merch and by turning to Revved Up promo for your own custom apparel needs. Reach them at revveduppromo.com. That's with 2 V's and 2 P's, or just check the show notes for a link.
We check out this incredible throwdown from Biden on Donald Trump's challenge to debate.
Yeah. So starting off here,
Donald Trump.
We got Donald Trump. So we got Joe Biden acting really tough right now. So we'll just play this clip and we'll kind of do the little like UFC kind of matchup here that seems to be.
Wait. Before we do, hit the John Cena real quick.
All right.
His name is John Cena.
Okay.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays. Donald Trump.
Oh, shit.
Because courts are closed on Wednesday.
Yeah. Also, did you say how many cuts are in that tiny little 14-second thing?
It's like
every sentence.
one sentence at a time.
So from an editing perspective, those jump cuts, those little pops between cuts mean that, well, he probably messed up. He could not say 15 seconds worth of statements without a bunch of cuts. Makes me really curious to see how he'll perform in a debate.
Well, I mean, he can't be on the drugs all the time.
Well, yeah, they're going to give him the State of the Union cocktail they gave him.
That's true.
Yeah, he'll come out ready to go.
Yeah, it's just,
We'll see.
I mean, he looks. It's just funny because like the acting trying to be tough, like the way he looks when he's going about this.
Make my day, pal.
But and he also, I like the framing of this because it's almost acting like debates haven't been a part of our traditions for like 200 years on president, like when it comes to presidents, like since before radio, right? And he's just being like, I'll challenge you to a debate right here, right now. It's just like, yeah, that's kind of what we've always done.
It's election season.
He's acting like, what's his name? Jake Paul, like challenging Mike Tyson to a fight or something like that.
Well, and you know, he's
Yikes.
quoting Dirty Harry. Like he's like this tough, like, make my day.
Well, he does definitely have some kind of like Gran Torino grumpy grandpa vibes, right?
Not even.
No.
He's not intimidating at all.
Yeah, Gran Torino, he's a badass.
Yeah, okay, that's
Like,
fair.
it does feel kind of
Highly
like
racist badass, but it's still a badass.
It does
Also
kind of
true
feel
vibe.
like 40s white guy, like 40s white guy mafia. Make my day, pal.
Yeah, look here.
But so we have a Trump response saying, crooked Joe Biden is the worst debater I've ever faced. You can't put 2 sentences together. Crooked is also the worst president in the history of the United States by far. It's time for the debate so that he can explain to the American people the highly destructive open border policy, news and ridiculous EV mandates that allow the allowance of crushing inflation, high taxes, and his really weak foreign policy, which is allowing the world to catch on fire. In quotes.
Good impression. Keep going.
I am ready and willing to debate Crooked Joe at the 2 proposed times in June and September. I would strongly recommend more than 2 debates and for excitement purposes, a very large venue. Although Biden is supposedly afraid of crowds. That's only because he doesn't get them. He just tell me when, I'll be there. Let's get ready to rumble.
I know words. I had the best words.
You're really getting there on the debate on the impression. Just keep working on it.
Have you
buddy.
guys ever seen you guys seen like the Shane Gillis of like Biden is the best foil to Trump because Trump gets into people's heads and
Joe's not there.
Yeah, Joe's not even in there. You can't get in Joe's head. He's not even in there.
I mean, you can get in, but you'll be all alone.
So what's Trump referring to here when he's talking about crowds and the venue size and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I
Like,
think
what's he talking
everybody knows that, at least if you've been kind of tracking it at all, Trump has been drawing some enormous crowds. I mean, I think there was one he did recently. It was
New
like,
Jersey.
New Jersey's like 100,000 people estimated there.
It's
Which
also a very pretty blue state.
Quite
New
true.
Jersey.
Well, and the type of republicanism, like you think of Chris Christie republicanism, right? Well, and also, they probably were just going there to see Burgum from North Dakota, right?
Oh,
Like,
for sure.
Probably.
He's a pretty compelling character.
draw.
Really draws the folks out. I mean, I think also, well, Biden is obviously not campaigning, right? So he's not drawing crowds. He's doing little events here and there, like with the labor union that he spoke with, and we'll
Spoke in front of the White House.
pull some stuff about that.
Yeah.
But he
didn't leave his house.
He's so insulated, and I think that's showing in the way that Biden is approaching this debate, because he came out all tough, and then it came out afterwards that he had issued all of these requirements that he wanted around the debate environment, and we can speak to some of those. Kyle, do you have details on that stuff?
I don't have the requirements offhand.
Well, it says they're requesting 2 debates, which is more traditional to do 3. Correct.
So yeah, that's what I understand. Yep.
And then Trump gets
usually even 4,
Trump's
I feel.
mic gets muted after his answers,
Which will
which
be
is
interesting
interesting.
because, I mean, obviously Trump has so much more energy than Biden. He could just talk straight over him.
Yeah.
Like if he wanted to. And I'm sure they're trying to insulate against that.
no live audience, which is obviously referenced, although both of those are referenced, and then no third-party candidates, of course, and that's obviously targeted at RFK Jr.
Boo.
Why are you such an RFK simp?
I just want him there. I just want
okay.
him to destroy both of them.
He's also from
He's
New
not an
England.
RFK simp. He just wants to see the world burn. I respect that more.
Yeah, it's
Some men just want to see the world burn.
this is true.
Well, I also like this Joe Biden follow-up tweet. I've also received and accepted an invitation to a debate hosted by ABC on Tuesday, September 10th. Trump says he'll arrange his own transportation. I'll bring my plane too. I plan on keeping it for another 4 years.
You mean Air Force One?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's not his plane.
Well, I mean, it is for now, I guess.
No, it's literally the taxpayer's plane.
Well, yeah, but
he
I
doesn't
mean,
own it. He doesn't get to keep it afterwards.
But we're just tax
That's like
slaves.
it's like
He
if
is the
you
people
work for
now.
Auto Glass and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go take my van around, and like you work for the Auto Glass place. It's like, no, you don't. That's your work van. That's what you take to around work.
He is the people now, isn't he? Is he not?
He's the exact
He's
same
the
thing.
he
Yeah.
is the people.
He is the
The
people.
government is us.
It's like
And
a
he is the
sacrament,
government.
right?
just like Fauci is the science.
Yeah.
Transmutation or transgeneration.
Remember when Trump, he was asked in an interview about what he thought about Air Force One, and he's like, "That's a nice plane."
Is that what he said?
Yeah, it was like something. He also did the same thing with the White House. He's like, I mean, it's an old house.
It's a fixer-upper. It could use a few things.
He's not wrong.
It is very old. This is true.
So Biden now has agreed that Kamala to debating whoever Trump picks for VP. We haven't really talked much about Trump's VP pick. There's a lot of speculation out there.
I speculated that I think there's a high likelihood it's Kamala. It's Tulsi Gabbard, the one who roasted the pig, known as Kamala.
Wow.
There seems to be a lot of angling on that right now. I don't know if things have been officially like picked, like behind the scenes, but there's that seems to be a big angle that's happening.
Tulsi definitely seems to be angling in for that with her how aggressively she's coming in on Israel-Palestine as a pro-Israel advocate.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a natural place considering her otherwise progressive credentials.
Yeah.
But there would be lots of assets to it. Having a female on the ticket, a good-looking female on the ticket, with legislative experience,
Military experience.
being a vet, all that kind of stuff, and her ability to articulate foreign policy better than Trump. Yeah.
I think she's in the cabinet regardless. Like, it's a sure thing that she's in some position, in the same way that I think it's a sure thing that Vivek's in some position. I just don't think he's going to end up being the VP unless it's really just like an insurance policy. Looking at Vivek, right? But
I mean,
I don't think that's the only that's the calculation.
Well, that's a fair point, though. I mean, what does Tulsi bring to the table in terms of that insurance policy? Is that a risk? Should something happen to Trump, would he or the apparatus around him view that the same way as they might view Vivek as a VP?
Yeah. Well, she is very disliked by the kind of the larger regime.
Like the establishment uniparty regime?
Well, there's also there's an interesting symbolic reference of having her there too, because she is a dissident person of the left. So there is kind of like, again, this big tent that seems to be forming of like the America Firsters, the dissident left, kind of like these young dissident tech people, the libertarians with the LNC. We'll talk about the LNC, right? Where we're seeing the Avengers assemble kind of a thing right now, right?
It's true. I mean, it would be a coalition building decision. Nerd Avengers.
I like it.
I don't know who would be better. Like, to me, she seems like she might be the best option. And we watched everything with Kristi Noem too, with her just being taken down by the media, right? With the things in her book, she killed her dog. Apparently, that was a terrible thing. Allegedly, I guess. I don't know.
I haven't read the book.
But she also lied. She also lied about meeting with Kim Jong-un.
Yeah,
which is
just
very
made it up and
strange.
put it in a book.
Yeah. I don't know if the ghostwriter was just like, this will be a fun story.
Well, there was some
She didn't know it
conjecture
well.
that she could have been, and I think this was Dave Smith that said this. She could have been. It sort of smells like maybe a setup that the ghostwriter put some things in there that were false enough that they would be called out by the media. No, nothing to back that up.
Hire
at this
a better
point.
ghostwriter. I don't know.
Well,
what
also like proofread your own biography.
Ideally.
if you're gonna have a ghostwriter, like read the book that's gonna be about your life.
But it is
before
interesting.
it goes out.
It is interesting. We're watching all these people come out with books right now because Tulsi
classic.
Gabbard has been going on basically a book tour on all these
RFK
podcasts.
has a book.
Yeah.
But this is on the Wuhan virus.
Yeah.
The real Anthony Fauci.
But that's old though.
No,
That's,
that's been out for
one's
a
old.
while.
Yeah.
No, he's got a new one.
oh, does he have a new one?
Ooh.
I feel like he does.
Yeah.
He also has that
Double check.
documentary out that was censored by Facebook, I believe.
Well, it's not even. It's like
He's got a campaign ad.
30-minute campain ad. It's not a documentary, but it.
30 minutes is basically.
Well,
a
I mean, I don't know.
documentary.
I watched the first 15 minutes of it before I fell asleep. No offense. I found it to be interesting history.
Yeah.
To that point, I'm sure that it continues to prop him up and show him off as a candidate. Of course,
It really gets into his whole anti-vax stuff and like his version of that. Basically, that's like the second half of it.
interesting.
There is also just interesting watching all the people that are starting to come around. Like Tim Scott's been doing a bunch of things with him. Burgum from North Dakota, he was the big draw at New Jersey.
There's this funny trend on Twitter that's happening, or on X rather, of showing a picture of people that are present at these Trump trials and saying like the VP pick is in this photo, and it's like Matt Gaetz or Tim Scott or Burgum or whoever, right? And like everyone's like just waiting with bated breath to figure out who this VP pick is. I don't think it really matters who it is in terms of the debate with Kamala. Whoever it is going to absolutely wax the floor with her, because she has nothing meaningful to say whatsoever. She'll regurgitate the talking points, but if it gets to sparring, I don't think she has it.
Yeah, I mean, imagine Vivek against Kamala.
Oh, man.
right?
so
Wouldn't that be so
satisfying.
crazy? And just even Tulsi Gabbard
AI
against
is kind of
Kamala.
a fancy thing. It's first of all, it's 2 letters.
Even just Tulsi against Kamala, like that was the thing that
we've already
really,
seen that.
yeah, that was the thing that really put the nail in the coffin on Kamala, because she was like the chosen candidate by the media for whatever reason, right? And then Kamala just completely roasted her in that one debate, and it was just all over because she just looked bad.
One of my favorite debate moments ever is that one.
Yeah.
Like from a public speaking to political angling to right time, right place, right person, like every part of that. It's like Ron Paul, a couple different Ron Paul debate moments, and then her. The new book from RFK Jr. actually came out in December of this year. 2023 is the Wuhan cover-up and the terrifying bioweapons arms race. So like he's releasing a book early on into the cycle makes a lot of sense. A lot of people do that. Actually, one of the first candidates to do that was RFK's uncle.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Is that where the tradition started?
Kind of. Yeah. I think it was more like a couple years before. But
RFK's uncle, as in JFK.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to be clear.
Just to be clear.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Oh,
I think I've heard
you
of
heard
him.
about him?
I've heard about
him.
that guy.
Tragic story. What happened to him?
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. His head just exploding out of nowhere like that. It's really strange.
Yeah. What if his head? The CIA is just like, what if his head just did that?
Great meme. Great meme. You'll see that meme in the Discord if you choose to join us over there. Links in the
I
description.
posted that one. Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Okay. Yeah. So, what's some of this other Biden stuff that's going on here, Dave?
So Biden has also released in front of a bunch of union members his new tariff plan. So you will remember Joseph A. Biden. our current president,
I've heard of him,
running for against Donald Trump in 2020. His rhetoric around this that he put on X that read, and you want to go to the other link here, Kyle, it's on the top of the notes. Quote, Trump doesn't get the basics. He thinks his tariffs are being paid by China. Any freshman econ student could tell you that the American people are paying his tariffs. The cashiers at Target see what's going on. They know more about economics than Trump. Hashtag Team Joe. Now, not only does that tweet not make any sense, because it kind of like any econ student and then cashiers at Target, they think they're all econ students. I don't, anyways. But like those two paragraphs, anyway, it's a weird case. But what's funny is they're actually right about the economics here, right? And this just kind of shows you to what degree the weaponization of science, knowledge, these sorts of things, that doesn't matter what's true to political actors, specifically campaigns. What matters is what allows you to make the other person look bad and make you look good, right? Because it's a popularity contest. That's what elections are.
Well, and the important thing is this tweet here comes from 2019.
Yes.
And it was a criticism of Donald Trump.
Right.
Now, the next thing is what he tweeted about this week.
Yeah.
Which is the complete opposite of that. Right?
Which is how great tariffs are against China.
I just imposed a series of tariffs on goods made in China, 25% on steel and aluminum, 50% on semiconductors, 100% on EVs, and 50% on solar panels. China is determined to dominate these industries. I'm determined to ensure America leads the world in them.
What's great about this is it just shows, like, when it's convenient, tariffs are good. When it's bad, tariffs are bad. But he was right in 2019. Tariffs are paid for by people in the United States who want to buy an EV. Now, I know you wouldn't ever buy an EV, Joe. You would never even consider the idea.
Yeah.
But if you had a choice between a $20,000 EV or an $11,000 EV with relatively similar functions, and you could buy it on top of your current car, so you have, the option to save money and all that kind of stuff, and maybe you can rent it out, right? Or have other options with that. Would you rather buy the $11,000 one or the $20,000 one?
All else equal, I would love to save the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably even worse than that. It's probably $11,000 to $18,000 versus $30,000, $40,000 to $70,000 for an American made.
Yeah.
So the real trick is actually by doing this, you're doing a series of things that are actually making things worse, at least depending on your values. For Joe Biden, when it comes to the environment, it means a lot of people will never buy the electric vehicle they might otherwise buy.
I don't think that the EV market needs, well, actually, let me rephrase this. I think the EV market in the US needs all the help it can get. Every headline we've been seeing is that companies that have invested so heavily in their EV programs are not seeing the demand that they wanted. Ford is rolling back. Volkswagen is rolling back. I just saw an article on Zero Hedge about parking lots full of Teslas piling up out of the factories in Fremont and elsewhere because nobody's buying them. In Germany as well, where they have another gigafactory. So this issue specifically, it's interesting to me that EVs are tariffed at 100%.
Yeah.
And that's definitely to help out this ailing program that they put so much political capital on earlier in the term.
Well, and not only that, we spent billions of dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act on specifically this. 4 companies got the majority of those dollars. 1 company went out of business. The other 3 have yet to actually do anything of substance in the EV market. In solar panel markets.
Right.
So that's just an example. Like, we can't build. You get a 50% extra on solar panels to protect those companies on top of stimulus. Like, it's the classic Milton Friedman quote. First thing you do is regulate it. Then when you regulate it, you start to protect it. And then when it starts to fail, you start to subsidize it. And then it becomes a zombie industry. And that's what these industries have become because they were never allowed to become an organic industry in the first place.
Right. Well, and just shows that there's nothing the government can do to stimulate demand for a product that people don't want.
Also, there's that. And that's that's where you got to get cap and trade and the various different climate regulations to punish people for using carbon and hydrocarbons.
Right.
And that's why they want to go there with it. They have to go there eventually. You can't just do it all with carrots. Unless there's a real advantage to it. And if we're in a cold climate, it makes no sense to get it. We're a northern country. We're a country that's most of the country has real cold winters. Right. So unless you're in the South, why would you buy an EV?
Well, global warming, Dave. Everywhere's getting warmer, so that won't be a problem in like 50
I don't think the
years
1 degree Celsius on average over a year is going to make that big a difference on starting an engine by battery in 100 years from now, right?
Yeah.
And why would I buy my car now for something that's going to happen 100 years from now?
Exactly.
But beyond that, it's also bad for the poor, right? It's hard to get any vehicle that's brand new for $11,000.
There isn't
In fact,
one.
you can get, out of like India, places like that, you have functionally what's the equivalent of an early 2000s vehicle that you can buy for $9,000 in India. But you can't do that because of import quotas or import tariffs. The logical trap is if you establish barriers, you'll enrich people within your country, and it doesn't do that. It actually makes everyone poorer than they otherwise would be.
Because they have to spend an artificially high price for a good that may not even be the best good that they could buy on the global market.
Right.
I mean, this would play well with labor, though, right? I mean, when he announced this, he was in front of an audience of labor unions, right? And they think, rah, rah, yes, you're protecting my factory jobs. So does it actually do that?
It's a bootlegger Baptist problem, right? So you use the Baptist logic of saving the planet and all that kind of stuff to encourage EVs, even as you're actually making it harder to convert to EVs, right? Because more people are going to buy an $11,000 EV than a $30,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 one. And then, yeah, you have the bootlegger part of it, which is the organized labor and their chokehold on the Democratic Party. So they have to justify it that way. But this is the exact, to be clear and to bring it back around, this is the exact same policy as Trump would have done, right? They just would have done with gas vehicles, which makes the poorer in the United States have less ability to access a newer vehicle and makes it more expensive for them to live. And then they'll blame it on inflation.
And China.
And China stealing the jobs and stuff like that. Meanwhile, what isn't discussed by either of them is the Environmental Protection Act as the reason why we can't expand solar panels.
Explain that.
Well, they want to build a solar panel farm right here in Montana, but they can't get approval because of the Environmental Protection Act, which says
what's stopping them?
Well, you got to have a permit process, and you have an environmental review. You just increased your expense of the land by $100,000, and increased the time to actually build on a new solar panel or plant or electric vehicle plant by $1 million, $100,000 over 10 years.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, but frankly, though, I mean that is a very valid point. Doesn't address the fact that that's so much worse for the environment to put a square mile of solar panels on the earth as opposed to, say, one oil derrick.
Yeah. But I mean, and you can make those trade-offs. The market can make those trade-offs, but it can't because right now, the only place where you can do that is, one, you have government ownership of all kinds of land that makes it more difficult, government permit processing that makes it expensive. No one talks about that, but they will talk about how we can punish the foreigners to make things better. Right. It's always easier, and it enforces and entrenches the power of government to punish the foreigners rather than actually taking accountability for the situation that makes manufacturing possible. Now, if you ask Mark Andreessen, who was one of the OGs of the internet, what we should do to bring back American manufacturing, he's not going to say tariffs. He's going to say something very different.
The only prospect for rebuilding U.S. manufacturing is advanced manufacturing. The only the only potential is to climb the tech stack and build new kinds of factories that are fully robotic and fully AI enabled, and where they are extremely advanced, sophisticated systems that run in a very different model than a manual labor system, and you pour as much technology in them as you possibly can. And the reason for that is just very straightforward, which is the big thing that caused U.S. manufacturing a lot of it to move offshore was the cost of people. Yep. It was just flat out cheaper to hire people in Korea or Vietnam or China or India or other wherever you go, Mexico.
So, and that's additionally, what he's not meaning is just wages. What he's talking about there is your retirement that's mandated by government, your healthcare that's mandated by government, your paying into Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, Part A, B, and C, that's all mandated by government. All of those things are what drive that, right? And people just look at the wage rate and they say, well, we want higher wages, but what they're not talking about is the fact that the degree to which those higher wages, and it's so costly to hire labor because we've made it costly because of government. That have rules that don't have this. Now they say this is to protect labor, but it also exploits labor because it creates a tremendously perverse incentive to either make labor's consumption poorer even as they produce, right? Because they don't have access to otherwise cheaper goods. Because all their labor inputs are also inflated in price because we've mandated all this extra spending going to government.
So what happens when people's jobs are displaced by technology?
Well, they get new jobs.
Just that simple.
Almost. Well, that's the historical record.
Well, you got to
people
go back
lay down the street, be like, candlestick makers just all died in the street today because the light bulb was invented.
A lot of horses lost their jobs when cars were invented.
That's true. A lot of horses ended up dying, but they mostly aged out. Yeah, where we ate them. Yummy.
But things transition normally, and usually there's a bit of a generational thing that exists there, which creates a little bit of a distortion, because usually the new generation adopts the new technology and starts to relearn things. But so there's always going to be some sort of distortion, but that's going to be the chaos of creative destruction, right? Not everything's going to be perfect right away.
Yes.
There ends up being lag effects and all this stuff, but that's just the natural evolutionary course of new technology.
And is it possible to get through that transition without some people experiencing pain?
Oh, no. People are going to experience pain, because some people aren't going to, they're not going to adapt quickly, right? That's just going to be a natural thing that happens, right?
There's a terrible assumption there, though, right? That the purpose of life is to not experience pain.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. That we should design life so that there is no suffering. It's utopian and ridiculous.
Well, it's a fallacy. Yeah. It's impossible.
Right. So if the question is whether or not you want a system, and don't get me wrong, we don't have to automate as much if we didn't make labor hugely liable. Every HR department is over empowered because of litigiousness of labor, because of government. If we didn't make it incredibly expensive, for every dollar you pay out in terms of paying somebody, you got to pay another dollar to the government. I mean, like, all of these things make labor expensive. Attack those things, but no one has the political courage to do so, or even to say it out loud. Because for the most part, even if you go to the people who are most concerned about AI, they're not talking about how we need to deregulate the labor market.
True. I mean, and you're seeing the effects of it even more broadly than we already have. I mean, there are the classic videos you've probably seen of fast food restaurants fully automating, to where it's a self-checkout kiosk and there's not a person behind the counter, and a machine makes your burger and spits it out for you. This is happening in California, and I think places in Washington. Just recently I saw a video, though, translating this to more of a, I would say, finer dining environment, where there was a robotic bus robot that had trays of dirty dishes on it going back to the kitchen. And I think I saw it on X. Not sure I could find it again, but interesting to see that, okay, it's starting to trickle out even further from fast food to other industries where traditionally humans have kind of been an integral part of that experience.
Well, automation of things is going to be a way that also fights inflation, right? Like, prices are going to start to go down as you're able to cut costs, because you're not having to pay pension funds, for people, right?
Right.
Like, you're not having to pay into Social Security, you're not having to pay all these, and just general labor, right? Like, that's going to be a inflationary reduction aspect on the economy if you start to implement more robotics and AI. Naturally, right?
The question still stands, though, that what happens when, the logical conclusion of this is that robotics get better, AI gets better, white collar workers aren't immune, nor are blue collar workers, labor. So what happens to the people who get replaced by automation that's infinitely more inexpensive for corporations to employ?
So there's two economic fallacies. You just have to be careful when you're thinking about that.
Sure.
One, it's the fixed pie fallacy, right? That there's a certain amount of pie that is the economy, and then if you have robots take up more of it, those people don't have anywhere to go. That's not how the economy works. The economy is a organic set of relationships. So when that happens, that increased productivity happens, there's going to be deflationary pressure on prices for consumer items. There's going to be inflationary pressures on other areas of the economy. Not to mention, this is all made much more difficult because of our current trade practices and our current monetary practices. But in general, what those people are going to do, if you look at the historical record, and you say why this is different than the other parts of the historical record, is that in general, people tend to find new jobs, find new ways of making and creating value for other people. They don't do that just because of not wanting to starve to death, but also because the other irony here for AI is that for 300 years, we've said working in cities is inhuman and terrible, and people shouldn't have to do the same repetitive labor over and over again. Everyone should be able to be a poet and go out there and create, right? And now that we're actually getting there, everyone says but you can't get rid of the manufacturing jobs. What will the idiots do? And it's just well, wait a minute. You're the exact same people who are telling me that everyone could be a poet and everyone could be creative and everyone should be able to do that. Now that we're actually confronting super productivity and the ability to make things very cheaply in mass with very little labor input, now all of a sudden everyone opposes it. Why? Because of entrenched interests of the bootlegger and Baptists. Not because they actually wanted that the whole time. They were just using those people as the mechanical tools for their political power.
That is the funny thing, because that was the Marxist wet dream, right?
Yes.
Was that you would know workers would no longer have to be exploited, and they could go out and do whatever artistic things that they wanted to do, and they wouldn't have to worry about the day-to-day. Like that was the vision, but and then the policies really didn't help with that vision. With the ends did not work with the means of what they were trying to do there. But when we're talking about just more innovation through things like robotics and AI, that actually seems to be bringing us more closer towards that vision of people being able to more free up their time.
Well,
right?
Imagine this: if you are currently a fencer. And I know fencers, right? It is a backbreaking manual labor job that you can't use a lot of heavy machinery because you have to get to a lot of places and you got to manually pound posts into the ground, right? Very difficult, a lot of upper body strength, great grapplers.
I thought you were talking about like the sword fighting.
I considered that as well, but I figured it was probably self-evident.
Took me a second.
Yeah,
I was the same. I was the same way until they started talking about pounding posts.
Yeah, you seem the same. It was because my Japanese accent last time. That's what it was. Yeah, got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, but yeah, exactly. All right. So, where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. What you'll probably have is, rather than one guy going out and pounding posts for 9 hours in a day, 10 hours in a day into the heat, you'll have, one guy with 3 robots. The robots actually pound the posts. He maintenances the robots, keeps them moving, makes sure that the project's going right, does a lot of the other intangibles when working with a customer, things like that. That's the most likely output in the long run for a manual labor job like fencing. Obviously, that's not manufacturing. Manufacturing is fixed robots. They don't have to be as mobile and things like that. But I mean, just kind of looking forward and how you think about it, you'll have humans working alongside robots, managing them and controlling them, and for potentially more niche labor industries as well. You can get more things made in smaller, that service a smaller niche because of that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's this, like, the same argument can be made with, when tractors were invented. It's like, well, what about all the professional scythe wielders? Like, that are just, now we don't have to employ as many people to get the same yield, right? Like, that's a pretty beneficial thing. Well, and this was what happened during the Industrial Revolution, is when you have like tractors coming about, this was a major distinction between the West versus the East. Is in Japan, they're like, no, we're not going to implement these new technologies so that we can keep funding, like making more jobs for everybody, because that's going to make us better. But in the end, you ended up having the West taking all the new innovations, and they ended up rising to the occasion because of it. And then everybody else kind of fell behind because they were so averse to adapting to new technologies.
Speaking of adapting, I'm curious from the Chinese perspective on this tariffs issue, like what are they looking at this as? What are their incentives? Are they going to be sending fewer products to the United States, sending more to other trade partners? Like what are the other global dynamics in play that these tariffs will have on the rest of the situation?
Well, definitely China will wind up partnering closer with other trade partners that aren't punishing them this way, right? And don't get me wrong, some of this is self-created, by the Chinese for their nationalist trade policy that has created a lot of anxiety for Americans, right? All kinds of requirements that Chinese put on American manufacturers as they come in. That doesn't mean we should raise trade barriers. Like, the whole fairness argument there doesn't actually work if you look at Ricardo or Milton Friedman's arguments around these things. But I mean, from the political angle of that, China's going to get punished by this from the largest consuming market in the world, America. That said, it's going to drive them into one of the other largest ones, Russia, who's because of America's sanctions on everything from China, Iran, and Russia, has kind of created a new pole in the world. And in fact, this week, we have some coverage from Bloomberg on President Xi meeting with Putin in China this week, right when all this drama was going on with Biden and Trump.
Vladimir Putin has...
Sorry, let me full screen it.
Vladimir Putin has arrived in Beijing for talks with President Xi. As you can see, they rolled out the red carpet in quite some fashion. Russian forces, of course, pressing ahead, meanwhile, with a new offensive in Ukraine. China's leader welcomed his Russian counterpart as he began a 2-day state visit. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Rebecca Chewing-Wilkins for the implications, the importance of this. Rebecca, what do we know about the visit so far? How important is this for Putin?
gratifyingly warm welcome for President Vladimir Putin into the Great Hall of the People for those talks with Xi Jinping, so directly with Xi, but also so-called sort of small groups as well, according to state media. Now, Xi Jinping has come up with sort of quite a full-throated support for Putin, reaffirming and saying that, you know, China's ready to work with Russia as a good neighbor, friend, and partner, and again stressing that they can consolidate their friendship for generations to come. So very much sort of affirming the no limits nature of the friendship that came, you know, that announcement came just weeks before Putin invaded Russia. But I mean, I think there's still this sort of somewhat unspoken tension. There are certain strains going on behind the scenes, not least these continued threats of US reprisals for what they perceive to be Chinese support of Russia's war industrial machine.
Yeah, it's so funny how many American institutions can on the gay argument with those two. Like, The Sun had an article that was cuddly tyrants, bizarre moment, Xi and Putin going for 2 hugs. It's like capital letters. An unprecedented touchy-feely embrace during despots' loving talks. It's just like, God, this is propaganda. Jeez.
It is a sign we've passed peak woke, though, right? Because
we can use gay in a derogatory sense now, right?
So long as it's talking about China and Russia.
Yeah, then it's okay, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so what the concern here, and from this, and you can't find it on YouTube, you can't find it on Rumble, on Russia TV, Putin gives a very long-winded, which is his habit, explanation.
He likes that.
The multipolar world we're going to. And he says, this is where we're at. Everyone recognizes it. The only people who don't recognize it are the Westerners because they're losing. And this is the representation of it. So as we do this, we're going to see more of these EVs get sold to South America that have a impoverished population that could use a discounted EV, and it's good. That's going to empower China. At the end of the day, it's not going to stop their rise. It's only going to slow us down.
It's really interesting you mentioned that the only ones that don't recognize it are the Westerners. I mean, obviously there are people amongst the population, ourselves and our listeners included, that are watching this happen and are seeing it and believing it. But it actually echoes some other things we've heard from President Biden recently in that interview he did with Aaron Burnett of CNN, calling out all these things about his campaign, saying, oh, the polling has been wrong all along. You know, seemingly stuff that you would think is just propaganda. That's we're just, you know, trying to put up this front of confidence. But actually, I mean, from what I've been listening and reading throughout the course of the week, these are actually earnest opinions from within the administration. They actually do believe the polling is wrong. They actually do believe that the people support them, which would translate potentially to their view of how the world views them and how, you know, how their position as leadership of the Western world and the globe more broadly.
You know, that's an interesting point, because I've had multiple people in the last week say to me that, you know, they feel like there's a big groundswell that's kind of moving towards Trump and the right now, just culturally speaking, all this stuff. But they feel uneasy about how the elite, you know, Biden types and things like that, they feel uneasy about how unconcerned they seem to be, especially because, like, if you think back to 2020, how manic the entire press was and just about everything with Trump at the time. Like, there was like at this time that year, there was just this manicness that was so widespread across everything. And right now we just don't have that. And it feels weird. Like, they feel oddly confident right now. You know?
Well, it makes you wonder, is it sort of this delusion of belief that, like, no, we are going to win? Or is it maybe that they have an ace up their sleeve or something else is kind of in the works where they have reason to be confident about their position?
I imagine it's probably more self-delusion, much like the 2016 election was, right? So there was no reason for Hillary Clinton to think that she was going to necessarily get it, right? She's not Barack Obama, right? In hindsight, we can see all the reasons why she was an unliked person.
How dare
but at the
you.
time, their attitude was, of course, it's her time, right?
Wouldn't you think with that in the rearview mirror, knowing how that worked out for them, it would make more sense for them to be a little more alarmist, to try to rev up their base and get people to the polls and say, hey, Trump is gaining ground. We need to beat him. You need to get out and vote. You need to be knocking on doors and supporting this.
Maybe they've just exhausted all that manicness.
Yeah, maybe
they're just like, oh, we're so tired.
That could be it. And I do think if you look at some people of the elite left, like Bill Maher, the Morning Joe guy, I forget his name right
Joe
now.
Scarborough.
Joe Scarborough.
Joe.
You'll find, yeah.
Joe from Morning Joe.
Idiot! Oh, what a loser!
My thoughts on Joe Scarborough.
I was
Not you.
yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Good for clarifying that. David was looking hurt.
Ow. That you can find them basically saying that there's a lack of urgency on the left right now, that they think they own it and they control it, and that's not necessarily true. So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe it is more equivalent to the 2016 election. It might be that.
But it's also a sense of control, right? They feel like they're in control, and you can tell by how overt they are right now in lots of different ways.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Zesty Beverages. They're on a mission to the standard American diet by crafting drinks with fewer calories and more nutrients from real food. Their lineup of delicious offerings now includes Electric Peak Yerba Mate, postbiotic sodas, keto-friendly, ready-to-drink margaritas, and hard teas. Wondering what a postbiotic soda is? Well, head on over to zestybev.com to learn more and find a retailer near you. Once again, check them out online at zestybev.com. That's ZESTYBEV.com.
We have a very interesting set of things happening around the globe. And this is an internet podcast. Like, we're based in America. We're based in the best place in America, Montana. But this is an internet podcast. We're talking about the globe. And one of the things that happened this week that was very interesting is Slovakian Prime Minister was had an assassination attempt against him. You want to kind of go into it?
Yeah, so Robert Fico, so this is from Glenn Greenwald here. Robert Fico, the Slovak prime minister just shot and gravely injured, is one of the most interesting and heterodox figures in EU politics. Formerly a fairly standard left liberal, he was elected on opposition to funding Ukraine's war and other EU dogma. So a couple days ago, Robert Fico gets shot just in public. He's leaving one of their official buildings, and I saw the video of him laying down on the ground, and everybody's swarming, what's going on? There was a video of that. He's currently in the hospital still, but he's an interesting figure because he was always kind of opposition party since 2010. He was kind of a leader in that space. He ended up resigning as a premier and just kind of left for a few years. And then last year, in 2023, he got elected to prime minister of Slovakia, and his entire record, essentially, or his rhetoric was all, we're not funding the war in Ukraine. It's anti-immigration, we're not taking in all these migrants and all these refugees and all this. It was extremely anti-vaccine, very against the COVID lockdowns and it's all the issues that you would expect of these right-wing populist movements that are in all of these countries that we've covered, right?
It's
so
he's
that figure.
He's probably the new consensus, or the new right consensus, or something like that.
Yeah.
The new populist right consensus of a random collection of things that they oppose, that the elites generally support from a conservative perspective. Mm-hmm. He's kind of been on that for a while.
Is there any evidence about who it was that tried to assassinate him?
I don't have it in the notes, but I did actually see a video of them talking to the guy that did it. I could pull that here in a second, but it was basically just I just don't like his policies. I think he's bad for the country. That's what he was saying, right? The guy that shot him. So it was
sort of a very measured take from a guy who just tried to assassinate a president.
He's a little bit less measured than the way I'm making it, but it's kind of how these types of shootings end up happening.
Beat up at that point.
He did get.
I imagine he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how.
But it was a guy that just ran up and shot, right? Just out in the open in a public square, basically, right?
And this wasn't the only assassination attempt this last week, was it? Wasn't there another one?
A nationalist candidate in Ireland was there was an attempted murder of him as he was out walking, canvassing, doing door knocking. Out there.
So
which I have a video from him talking about it that we'll get into later.
Sure.
Too.
Well, this again just raises that question of, maybe the globalist figures are so comfortable because they know they have this card they can play, which is just kill anyone that opposes them. Take the Boeing hitman example, and
It's all just coincidence, Joe.
I know, quit noticing.
Stop your noticing. Well,
Just
that is
asking questions over here, Joe.
I'm just asking questions.
well, and it is always important to remember, like,
You can't handle the truth.
it's always important to remember. Most people can't handle the truth because, like, this is our foreign policy: is reinstalling new democratically elected leaders and conducting assassinations and rigging elections. Like, this is what our foreign policy is, right?
And to be real, like, most people are not going to see the Slovakian prime minister story or make any connection to it at all. They'll be like, oh, that's weird. And like, it'll go right by, right? There's not going to be any larger context it's going to be put in by most people and what it means for, if it was, organized in some way, who would it be? Or is it just a random act of election year violence, right? And that does happen. Election year violence, it does happen. But there's also a very known process that the United States government has done in the last 100 years to take out opposition leaders around the globe using cartels, using private mobs and mafias, and using even sometimes some crazy people as assets.
Well, and also just trying to create, this is one of the biggest things that the intelligence apparatus tends to do in other countries, is they try to create environments where people kind of naturally are willing to go do this type of thing.
Sure.
Right?
So they create a very frenzied media environment where people feel really threatened by this person's policies or their presence and their political views, and then take it upon themselves to act on those feelings.
Well, and right, like remember the Twitter files, right? Where you have intelligence agents that are going in and actively working for Twitter, and also like being like, this is the type of stuff that we want, and you have people manipulating the algorithms in other countries, right? So you try to create the media environment in that way through social media, and you get people kind of clicked up into certain groups to try to rile them. Like there's all the stuff about like Russian bots and things like that was always a concern that people were like, because Trump's a Russian agent, but like countries do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And they try to put their assets into proper places in these companies, or either internally or externally, to try to drive an environment towards their end, right?
Now that's possible, and I think there's a good case to be made there. So for example, Mike Benz has his interpretation of the Ukraine war has long been that it's really over the liquid natural gas, that Burisma and a lot of these companies that were dealing in Ukraine with Russian gas were at some point kind of taken over by assets and connected to by assets and arrangements, such as by Hunter Biden himself, with intelligence agencies and intelligence agency cutouts such as the Freedom Democracy Institutes, those ones. I can't say them out loud, and I'm not going to say the agency that's responsible for that. So the whole idea is that they don't want natural gas going from the east to the west. You can see that there is instead they want to go the other direction, right? They want Poland to supply the natural gas to Germany, not Russia, right? So that's why he says Ukraine is kind of the issue that it is for NATO in the West. Well, he thinks that Slovakia kind of plays into that as a key role because they're kind of right in that nexus between Ukraine, Romania, Poland, and that area. So here's a little bit from Mike Benz.
And I have been fascinated by Slovakia for some time because, it's one of these, V4, Visegrad 4 countries, which is very critical for the foreign policy establishment's control over as a buttress to Ukraine and as a key puzzle piece in the Grand Ukraine energy play. The Grand Ukraine energy play is basically this move by NATO energy stakeholders and the whole Atlantic Council, Atlantis' foreign policy set to make basically $1 trillion in windfall profits by prying off the natural gas market of Europe, which until about 20 years ago was 100% controlled by Russia, which made Gazprom the single largest company in the entire world in 2005, 2006, and then through State Department coerced European energy diversification policies. Because Russia has the cheapest gas and the most plentiful, and otherwise you have to buy more expensive Western LNG. There's been a big part of the move here, and a big part of the Ukraine coup in 2014 was to pry Russian gas off of Europe and replace it with gas coming from the west of Ukraine rather than the east. And a central part of that linchpin plan has been the resupply. See, Ukraine has played such a vital role in the gas market, not because of all the gas that's in Ukraine, but because of the gas transit from Ukraine into Europe from Russia. There's legacy architecture that dates back 100 years. And these pipelines are expensive, they're difficult to maintain, they're deeply interconnected. That's why there's 15 to 30 year contracts on these things. And so the ideal situation is you cut off the Russian gas from the east, and you simply have a new entry point from the gas, but you keep all of that legacy architecture that goes all the way, out to Rotterdam.
So that's the setup, right? So that's Ukraine going in. Any questions from there, Joe, that you didn't cover?
No, I think that's clear.
Yeah, so we've probably under talked about this particular perspective about why this. He thinks this connects to Burisma specifically and Hunter Biden specifically as part of this as the cutout for the Atlantic Council, the Atlanticists. When he says Atlanticists there, but to be clear, think of NATO and the West into kind of one geopolitical strategy. Actually, the Atlanticist is actually a term coined by Dugin, is opposed to Eurasianism, right?
And Dugin is the Russian philosopher.
Yeah.
Atlanticist, not to be confused with Atlanticist Morissette. Right?
or the Atlanteans.
It's a little bit ironic.
Or Atlantis.
Yeah. It's like rain. Okay, so anyways, keep going. He's about to get into Slovakia and kind of how it fits into it.
And the way that they have plotted to do that is primarily through Poland. Poland has this vast new set of gas architecture that can take LNG coming in from the Baltic Sea and then connect through terminals from Poland into Ukraine. And this is why the political leadership of Poland has been such an important thing for NATO to control. And as we just saw with this, with what just happened there a few months ago. But Poland's ports themselves run through Slovakia. Now, this is very important because Slovakia has been on the edge for some time now. The near assassinated president there, Robert Fico, has pledged to not go through with their gas contracts with Russia. They have one set ending in 2024 and another set ending in 2027. Then they pledged to restore those gas contracts with Russia and not cooperate with the desired sanctions of the EU. They are also putting pressure on Ukraine to restore gas relations with Russia. Both Hungary and Slovakia are having conversations about having Ukraine restore some limited amount of engagement with the Ukrainian gas market. This new president has basically rejected the NATO line on the Ukraine-Russia war. And because of the leverage they have over the EU and NATO, because the whole Grand Ukraine energy play, the whole $1 trillion play to run LNG through Poland into Ukraine runs through Slovakia. If this new prime minister decides, hey, you know what, actually, you're going to put sanctions on us if we don't go along with your war, or we have a trump card over you, which is that goodbye to the gas transit to Ukraine, which, by the way, is all of Ukraine's national revenue, essentially, because in order for that gas to go from Poland to Ukraine, you need to go through us. And so
Stop it there. That's a pretty key piece there.
And that's one of the things that if you don't understand that, it's really difficult to grasp the potential motive for a special ops operation. Now, if you zoom in here on this, you can kind of get a sense for the geography at play. So you see Slovakia, they're right there dead in the center. And so what he's saying is that if you're trying to get natural gas from Black Sea or from the Baltics, which is to the north, you have to go through Poland or you have to go through Romania, Moldova, Hungary, and things like that to get over to Germany, versus the existing USSR infrastructure that was already built to move natural gas and other products from Moscow and like the mainland Russia through Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, Poland, and into West Germany.
And I'll also remember, because another key player in all this is Viktor Orban from Hungary as well, which is just directly south and also neighboring to Ukraine, right?
Who are definitely stuck in the middle with Poland in this. And so one of the things to kind of step back and think about here is the degree to which, this story on the ground that happened this week, it could be just a random dude. It could be just a random crazy guy who got all excited, got a gun and went and did something crazy. possible. But if you need that to be true, and you look at this scenario and you look at our our intelligence apparatuses actions over the last 100 years to try to control markets like this, and then you say, well, it couldn't be that because that requires a conspiracy of the intelligence communities doing things that they wouldn't tell the American people. Well, that's their job, is not to tell us. That's what they do. They've been doing it for 100 years. So, of course, what we got to do is speculate a little bit here and look at what is their potential motive. And if we have a sensible motive, then we work backwards from there. We say, okay, motive, do we have the means? Well, have they ever used this before? This sort of thing before in a country? Well, yeah. And then do
Our
we have
spies would never do that.
But then do we have material evidence? We don't. So we don't have a full case yet, but it's something important to consider.
Prove it.
Prove it.
There's just interesting, like the dynamic in itself is very interesting, and the motive of someone doing that would be very clear. Like that's what matters here. And we're not going to figure out, and we're not going to know the exact intricacies of all the power games that are being played here. But like, if you're looking at Europe as pieces on a chessboard right here, it seems so clear as like this guy is very problematic in the center, like literally the center of everything.
Of the whole thing. That is no joke, Kyle. And I think one of the things that, if we're looking at our mission of trying to help people see past the bullshit and to see what's really going on and develop mental models of the world that help them explain the world, we have to talk about this. Because if we don't talk about this, we're not doing our job. We're not doing what the media, we're going to be doing what the media does, which is just say, hey, this guy got shot today.
Oops. That sucks.
Well, on to that portal thingy between New York and Dublin.
Yeah.
See them titties or what?
Which we will now do.
Really quick before we move on from this, I think one other thing that could be pointed to, which I don't actually think it is, I just want to give the full scope, is that a little under a month ago, Slovakia's government did approve to overhaul their public TV radio. So that is something that could be pointed to where
that's
this
interesting.
Crazy person got upset at that. But I mean, I don't.
Ulterior motive then.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if someone's like, we're defunding NPR, or some liberal's like, time to die?
No, I think basically it gives
spread it on.
It gives more control to the government.
Oh, really?
Versus Oh,
okay. I assume they're going the opposite direction.
Yeah, I guess
my NPR.
My NPR.
Oh, my Sesame Street.
The criticism is the government is taking full control of the
They're
media.
taking Big Bird from me.
So that is in opposition then, ostensibly, to the positions of the president of Slovakia.
We don't know the exact dynamics, because he could be a kind of a one-off figure in here with the general apparatus not being on board with his executive decisions, right? Like,
sure.
The apparatus itself of Slovakia, and I don't know the dynamics of Slovakian politics, right? Like, none of us really do. It's a very small country. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Slovakia, but it could be similar to these other countries like Argentina or Bukele or like in El Salvador or whatever, where you end up having this guy that is a right-wing populist that leads to kind of a revolution in the executive branch, but everything else is not necessarily controlled by him, right?
And noting that the president is not from his party. Zuzana Kaputova, first female president, has limited powers compared to the prime minister, but also has, power within the government.
Yeah, so he could be a guy that's just kind of like a wedge in between a lot of forces at play, that it would be very easy if he just was not there, right?
Sure.
It could be that.
Sure.
Like I don't know the dynamics itself, though.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Speaker of the National Council is also in an opposition party to him. So very interesting.
Yeah. So, and as you were referencing, another thing with Ireland, but before, let's have a little bit of levity before we go to the Ireland assassination attempt that happened.
Other stuff with Ireland.
Yeah. So here in America, we've developed a portal between New York and Dublin, where
it's at CERN, actually, in Switzerland. I'm kidding.
Oh, I was like, wait, what?
That was a conspiracy portal joke about demons and stuff.
Like interdimensional demons or something.
Machine elves.
That's right.
It's just people taking ayahuasca and seeing the Clockwork Elves. I don't know.
No. It's just a new way to transport migrants from the Middle East and South America directly into our urban centers.
We just
portal.
load them up into the portal.
That's right.
Portal
just
transit.
Dump them right in there.
But what's been funny about it is it's just become a very internet thing because you have jokes being spread between the Irish and the New Yorkers, like some very dark humor. You have Irish people holding up phones of.
Okay, wait. We got to be clear about what we're talking about here. This is actually a video portal. There's a screen in Dublin and a screen in New York City, and they both have cameras on them. I don't know if there's microphones involved. I doubt it. But basically, it was supposed to be this like nice, like international diplomacy way of like connecting the people of two big cities around the world.
The cultures can,
and naturally, like everything intended to be nice and innocent, it got depraved and perverted very quickly.
On day one, you have Irish people holding up phones with videos of planes hitting the Twin Towers. Right?
Yikes!
It is so hot.
That's why we can't have nice things.
No, exactly. Right. And then New York retaliated with a pair of America's finest
potato
export.
So you have here. It's all a battle against Big Potato.
Well played.
So yeah, you have an OnlyFans girl flashing the Irish people through the portal, and Alex Jones had a lot of interesting things to say about it. Because somebody put that in there, and Alex Jones said, "So what do you think?"
That's so funny.
It seems accurate.
1776 will commence again.
We have to take the fight back from Big Potato. They're influencing all of our institutions. There has been a funny meme, kind of new meme that's arisen in the last 2 weeks. I think largely sparked by this portal because. You know, all the conspiracies about like Jews controlling the banks and all these things, right? People have been like, have you noticed all the Irishmen controlling all the banks? Like things like that. So there's been a lot of Big Potato references.
While we're on the subject, this episode of Human Reaction is brought to you by Potatoes.
There is sponsor. There is some Irish representation on this podcast from you both.
Indeed.
But yeah, so that happened there. But in more serious news, you end up having there was a nationalist candidate. His name is Malachi Steenson. I don't know. Is my Irish pronunciation correct there, Joe?
I would say it's probably Malachi, but I could be wrong about that.
Oh, it probably is Malachi. It's just normally Malachi has an I at the end.
True.
You know? That's the biblical, but whatever.
I could be totally wrong about that.
But yeah, so he was hit, there was an assassination attempt or a murder attempt, whatever you want to call it, on him while he was out doing campaigning.
Just while today we saw reports about politicians being intimidated and some of them giving out about shouty words being said to them, and they were all so upset. This evening, while we were out canvassing in East Wall, approximately 20 minutes ago, a guy arrived at my office, banging down the door, threatening a young nephew, threatening to kill me. He'd been followed here, he'd been stopped earlier by Gardaí, and he said he was on his way to kill me. They didn't know he was serious, so they followed him, and he had arrived here intending to attack me or kill me. Thankfully, the Gardaí responded immediately, and now a man is in custody. These are the threats that we face in this country for standing up for our people. Just like the Prime Minister in Slovakia was shot today because he opposed the European Union agenda. We are going to pay a heavy price in this country for what's happening. This is the beginning. You have a chance to change it on June the 7th by voting nationalist across the country.
So we had an interesting comment on our YouTube channel. A user by the name of Reckless037 asked, "You guys pay a lot of attention to Irish politics for an American podcast. Why? So what is the relevance here for us in America?"
It's nationalism. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of Irishmen.
We are being funded by Big Potato. That is Rev Up promo, actually.
Yeah, right.
They are Big Potato.
Kellen is a ginger as well, so actually, shoot, we've been seen.
But I mean, it does go to show there's. Sorry, Mr. Reckless, but we pay attention to a lot of these new populist movements that are sparking all over the country or all over the world. the country, the country,
The broader
America,
country. The global.
America across the globe.
Yes. The empire, as it were.
The empire, as it were. Where we talk about El Salvador, Argentina, Brazil, right? The Slovakia stuff, Ukraine, like all of you start to see, you start to put all the pieces together. Like all these pieces are coming together. It's like Charlie at the whiteboard, right? Where you're like, there's something broader, bigger that's happening here, especially with these like right-wing populist movements that seem to be, it's showing a massive culture shift globally.
Yeah.
Right.
And like you said, David, that's part of what I think we try to do differently from other mainstream media sources is connect the dots and show people that there's more that's going on than just isolated incidents around the world that you might gloss over in isolation.
Mm-hmm. The question of, well, we don't have the material evidence yet, so we can't talk about it, is one of the things that prohibits people from actually incorporating things until it's too late to make a difference. And what I mean by incorporation is ingesting them into your worldview so that you can make sense of the world. So it doesn't just, it isn't that everything has a common cause. It's very possible these are two completely unrelated events, other than the fact that the ideologies of the two people who were attacked are pretty similar in the fact that they both oppose the EU and the kind of national Atlanticist conventional thought. The fact that there's violence against them in the same week is a pattern, right? A pattern that might be just the data, just be the chaos of the data, and that's just happened to happen that way, and that's just a coincidence. Coincidences do happen; they're real. But that said, we should note that this is a thing that is not untypical as a potential centralized cause, or at least that has been set up by the atmosphere that we're currently in when it comes to the mainstream press and how they cover these issues and how they believe get people to believe, especially people with mental illness, believe that this is the end of the world. For example, there was actually an article today in Drudge I saw quoting for some, I can't remember what it was, I think it was MSN, saying that this big national investor said there's a 1 in 3 chance that this is the last election in America. We'll go to a civil war after this one. Right?
1 in 3.
1 in 3.
Who quoted that?
It was some guy, I can't remember, I can look it up. But his he runs an investment firm. 1 in 3 chance of civil war. It's billionaire investor Ray Dalio.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've read his books.
Big deal.
Yeah, so he said 1 in 3 chance, covered by MSN.
Party pooper.
That's the sort of thing that would make someone, I don't know, maybe do something radical.
Well, right, yeah.
He has a whole book about like the rise and fall of empires, and looking at it from like an investment, financial kind of approach to it. And he basically makes the case we're watching the decline of the American empire and the rise of like the Chinese Eastern, whatever that Eastern Bloc empire kind of is.
So if you read the actual MSN article on it, doesn't mention any of that. Doesn't give you any of that. It just says this very important person said it's 1 in 3, and if we just redistributed more money to low-income people, that something Trump will never do, we wouldn't have to worry about that problem.
I wish you weren't a liar.
Yeah, well, that's how they make it.
Well, so some of the stuff here with the Irish stuff too, because just to kind of follow up on the on what we talked about last week. There is an element here. I'm just pulling tweets from Uber Boyo, who we used last week on some of his talks. One thing that I find interesting here is like the right wing doesn't need terrorism. 75% of the European people are on our side. From the polling that I'm seeing, that suggests to be true, especially in Ireland. Like the nationalist movement in Ireland, they seem to be like 80% of the country is in agreement on this stuff.
Wow.
Like all the polling. And we showed those votes on like the changing of their constitution. And just everything that just got completely destroyed, right?
Yeah, it was more than that. I think it was like 80-20 rejection of those changes.
I would be interested to see this type of polling in these other countries as well, like because you have this dynamic of like the people versus like the elite class, like wherever the DCs of their chosen country are, where they stand versus where the people at broad stand.
Right.
And that's how you breed, populist movements, because the elites stop representing the chosen the chosen people, the people in any meaningful way.
The real question is whether or not the conservatives.
That was a Freudian slip, I think.
The real question is whether or not the conservatives can really grasp this as the action is in the reaction. Now, for example, there was a national conservative convention they're going to host in Brussels that was shut down by the Brussels mayor using the police power. Why? Because of hate speech. just prohibitively. We're just like, we're not going to do it. And this is the France 4 article. The political storm erupts after police told to shut down hard right NatCon event in Brussels. Of course, they have to use hard right because this is France.
And NatCon means National Conservative.
Right.
So it's like the National Conservative movement that's spread across Europe.
Right. And then you have, of course, we do have some good news, though, to end that with, is that the court in Brussels said, hey, you can't do that.
Hold on. We have rules.
Covered by The Guardian, yeah.
There are rules.
But National Convention, NatCon conference paywall resumes after Brussels court overturns closure order. Now, whether or not it's still going to go, if they're going to move it, all that kind of stuff. This is the important thing to understand is like that kind of actor, like that mayor of government, he's not getting orders from anybody, but he himself is set by the climate, much like the Arab Spring or other climates that are encouraged by these kind of forces that exist to do this. And then even take a personal political cost, such as violating, their own charter as Brussels to do so.
I do like this image they've chosen to use of Nigel Farage.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
looking very animated.
The British love to hate that guy.
Yeah. He's an interesting character. He was in Bozeman at one point. I met him.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. He's a very interesting figure, but I mean, it just goes to show of like where the trends are starting to move, and the elitist types that are involved in this larger kind of globalist agenda or whatever you want to call it, they're losing control, and just for I think a lot of varying reasons, right?
For example, in the stock market, we have the comeback.
The reprise.
The return of the Jedi. The return of the meme stonk.
Don't call it a comeback.
Don't call it a comeback.
Yeah. So over this last week, GameStop went up 300%.
That's
to
weird.
The moon, baby.
And the reason for it is why
does Google want to blind us?
No, yeah,
or
like,
not Google.
Twitter keeps like resetting my display settings, and it just goes.
Is it Brave?
Randomly goes.
Mine
white.
never does that.
No, it's Twitter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
X. It's because you keep calling it Twitter.
That's what
I'm
it
dead
is.
naming it.
It's pissed at you.
They're mad. So you have this fella by the name of Roaring Kitty. He was kind of the leader back in 2001. If people remember. If people remember the GameStop AMC short squeeze that happened during the COVID era, and everybody was freaking out about GameStop, there was like billions of dollars in shorts that got liquidated, all this stuff. Yeah, you had Wall Street freaking out, and
hedge funds were liquidated.
Yeah, hedge funds liquidated, like it's crazy. So this Roaring Kitty guy, who was kind of the leader of that back then, he came back to Twitter with a series of videos that he's just been dropping. They're just like meme videos that are just goofy, funny, and he had about 200,000 followers when he came back, and within 3 days he's up to 1.3 million followers.
That's pretty wild.
It's pretty wild. Like he's gained 1 million followers in the last few days.
So what does this have to do with this stock though?
So he came back. GameStop went up.
Just by him going back.
Just by him coming back on Twitter.
Okay, so I don't want to upset this take. What I heard was actually that it was not causality between Roaring Kitty coming back and GameStop going up, but that the conditions existed for GameStop to start going up prior to him coming back.
Prove it.
And that was a part of the thing. I'll find the source for this and we'll have it in the show notes.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, a lot of people are speculating that it's not actually him running this account, that he sold his account.
Interesting.
So like, because just this morning, GameStop announced that they're going to be increasing their shares 15%, and they're raising money, and which is something that they did in 2001 as well.
Increasing their shares meaning issuing more stock.
They're issuing 15% more stock,
which would have downward pressure on the stock price per share.
Yeah, exactly. So we have here. So Wall Street is kind of freaking out again because you have all these people shorting, and this guy who's really become very popular recently, Ian Carroll. There's a nice little analysis that he gives of what's going on here that I think will spark our conversation around this. Let me just get the correct timestamp on it. But
don't goof it up, Kyle.
Yeah,
you can do it.
It's not a good timestamp thing.
It's so funny that you got all these like professional stock people talking about a Twitter follower named Roaring Kitty.
It's like there was a documentary made about him.
Really?
Yeah, or not a documentary, like a comedy show that was made like on Netflix. Yeah, apparently I never watched it.
Huh?
But So this guy, Mr. Mustache himself, who's kind of, I don't know, he's just gotten so popular recently. It's kind of crazy to see. But
so short selling is pretty dangerous, and everyone knows that. And back in the 90s, all these rich people like at Bain Capital, like Mitt Romney, they realized that they can actually take companies down from the inside and basically loot a company from the inside, take all its money, give it to them and their buddies, the shareholders, and then bankrupt it and leave. And there's not really any consequences. You just buy into the company, buy a bunch of shares, get yourself on the board, take it over, start hiring people that'll do what you want, mismanage it, do a bunch of buybacks so the money gets paid back out to you and the shareholder buddies. And you can really just mismanage the company into the ground and basically loot it for all it's worth. And when it goes bankrupt, it's like, oh, well, whoopsies, it was destined to fail. We'll just move on to the next company, whatever, my mistake. And they made billions of dollars doing this to Toys R Us. And everyone else was looking around like, damn, that was a pretty solid strategy, Bain Capital. Maybe we could do that to some other companies. And this was just after the .com bubble happened. And so there was this whole internet thing. Amazon was on the rise. And everyone kind of realized, like, you know, there's all these retail stores out there that are probably in big trouble, like Blockbuster and Sears and GameStop, you know, companies that are bound to fail. So why don't we make them fail faster and profit off of that? Plus, it turns out that these dudes that work at places like Bain Capital that can take these places down from the inside out, turns out they have a lot of friends in the market that like to short sell. And the thing about supply and demand is when I'm borrowing like thousands and thousands and thousands of shares and selling them into the market right now, all that selling actually makes the price of the stock go down, because like when everyone's selling something, it gets valued less. But when everyone wants to buy something, the value goes up, right? So short selling actually makes a stock's price go down. And these guys realize that, like, you know, you like to make money when stocks go down, and I like to make money when companies get destroyed. And when we do those both at the same time, everybody wins. Except the company, of course. And then it turned out they were like, hey, we both know a lot of people in the mainstream media that like to report on failing companies. You know, the kinds of reports that make investors scared and make them want to sell a stock. And they realized they kind of had the dream team for bankrupting companies, and they could all make money on the way down and no one would ever stop them because it's kind of legal.
Yeah. So the general idea here is the people that are making the stock price go up, we had like the Wall Street bets phenomenon back in the 2001 cycle, is they are the resistance movement to these people, right? Because you have people that make a ton of money by actively destroying companies and then shorting them. And then you have these people that are just like, hold no matter what, hold the line, make price go up. We have all this buying power, which is just there's an interesting cultural phenomenon that exists there, where you have the confluence of like populist social media versus elite bigwigs at hedge funds, right? And like the amount of buying power that you have, kind of like small groups of people with a lot of buying power, then large groups of people with like decentralized buying power. And that is kind of the financial warfare that seems to be happening in these environments, right? So
is this indicative of a broader clash, a social clash between the elite and the everyman?
I think so, especially when you see the people online that are like, you have just major influences, and it seems to be very right-wing, right? Like it's like right-wing populism also, just like all these other movements that are happening. It's just like another facet of how that is manifesting itself. And they're all, this is where things get a little hairy, because especially like legally, because there's like financial advice and like
not
like
financial advice. Do your own research.
Yeah, do your own research. I'm not invested in GameStop or AMC or any of these things. AMC I don't think is pumped, but who knows if they just move over to AMC next.
I've heard it's gone up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, because people are anticipating what happened last time, right? Yeah. But it manifests itself in it's that cultural ethos that is like all those influencers that are just like buy and hold. This is about a movement. This is about, right?
Yeah. Whether or not it's actually effective is another question, because you're playing a game that these moneyed powers know very, very well, and they're very well connected, and they have all the resources at their disposal, and the everyman in this situation certainly does not.
I am reminded of last kind of cycle, which we had like during the COVID cycle, there was a kind of a famous document that was put out called the God PDF. And it was mostly an analysis of like Dogecoin and kind of like meme coinery, but like meme stockery falls into the same development. And it was entirely an analysis of whale games on trying to manipulate the public towards very specific mythologies and narratives, things that I talk about in politics all the time, but the same type of thought applies into markets.
Whales being people that are highly capitalized that have a ton of money to throw around in a given market.
Yeah, and then manipulating things to try to get manipulating narratives to create price shocks that happen, and then slowly divesting over time into the pumps, right? As a means of just expanding massive amounts of capital and using cultural movements to do that, right?
In crypto parlance, dumping their bags on retail, as it were.
That would be the way.
Selling into all the retail buying pressure to cash out of their investment.
And that is something where, because you have this kind of moralization of us against the big guys and all this stuff. And if you're a whale in this environment, it's not crazy to think that there's a lot of that fuel on the fire to try to manipulate folks that are, anti-establishment, against Wall Street, etc. We can do this too. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of, there's some of that's happening. It's a matter of how much of that's happening, right?
Yeah. Are these phenomena indicative of a healthy market?
A lot
No.
Well, rhetorical question.
Over-financialization. Everyone has to play this game because we over-financialize everything because of our monetary policy. You know what I was going to say, but
I did. I did.
Someone had to say it.
I needed it to be said.
We talked about the Fed today twice. Now we're going to put that away.
well, actually, we got one more. I think.
And that's exactly I don't think that this is the signs of a healthy culture as a whole. Like the fact that people do these things and can be very like this is a very profitable environment to do it, and it's way more people feel the need to gamble rather than do anything else, right? Like,
why?
Because I think it's a sign of how corrupted and degrading our society is, and the systems around it.
That,
right?
And all of the systems to do something productive that would actually make things with atoms are highly prohibitive. To do something with labor are highly prohibitive. You have the growth of licensure everywhere. To do anything that what we used to do as a country when you had a young man who wanted to go make some money was to go build something, make something, do something.
Create value.
It's gamble smartly.
Right.
Or manipulate the internet, right? That sort of participate in a mass movement.
Yeah.
Well, when it's not to say investing has a very important part in society, right? But it's the malinvestment aspect that is so critical. I feel this way in the crypto industry all the time. There are very important projects that I think are going to be revolutionary for society, but so much of the focus gets put on a coin that is the ticker Bitcoin, it is ticker Bitcoin, and it's Obama Sonic Inu Shiba coin. It's this long name, or Pepe coin or whatever,
right.
And there's that element where is and those coins will go up 1,000%.
Yeah,
right.
I think it's really an interesting cross section of degeneracy, like you're saying, of culture, of the means of a person who is just trying to work and get by and support their life, their family, live a fulfilling life where they feel productive. I think a lot of people are feeling left behind. They're not feeling like they actually have the means to invest in a responsible manner to get a reasonable return for their money. Nowadays you can get 4.5% in a CD or other savings vehicles through your bank, which historically was not the case when we had near zero interest rates. Right, you were getting pennies out of your interest from your bank for putting money away. Now, you can get 4.5%, but is that even beating inflation? No. So people feel compelled to have to gamble to get a better return. And they feel like it's the only way that they can possibly get ahead, that they have to just put it all in red and spin that wheel and hope that it turns out in their favor.
And to me, my exact, because people will look at CPI, like you kind of got to beat like the CPI inflation. I think it's much more like if you're not beating the S&P, you are losing value. And the S&P is much more like 20%. Like if you're not getting 20% return on all of your money, you are losing value over time. That is the way that I look at it.
Because the CPI doesn't include housing.
Well, and to me, the S&P is a much better indicator of a basket of goods of how the economy is actually doing, right? And so if you're not beating that, to me, that's failed asset allocation.
But it's also another measure of over financialization, right? So you're going to have a growth in the S&P that correlates with your expansion of the money supply.
Correct.
And that is a showing of inflation. It's the real trick there of like what people are actually suffering from on the ground. And that's why everyone looks at the CPI numbers and go like, bullshit.
Yeah.
They look at it like, you know how expensive milk is right now, or steak, or chicken, or avocados, whatever.
Yeah. Like I'm pretty sure like every single grocery bill is 50% higher than it was 4 years ago.
Yeah,
for me personally.
Completely.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where I would slightly disagree with you, and I would agree with you, David, that I don't think the S&P is a good measure of how the economy is doing. I think it's a good measure.
I think it's a good measure of like
inflation.
If you're not beating that, you are losing.
Yes.
Like that's what I mean.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
precisely.
Like because people will be like, well, the dollar is devaluing by 4.5% because CPI, blah blah blah, all this stuff. And if you're looking at 4.5% as your investment measure of like how good is your money doing outside of like just sitting in a bank account, like as an actual investable, you are losing. Like that is losing
for sure.
Like you have to be beating like 20-25% to be maintaining your value, in my opinion.
For sure.
Do you want to check out Charles Payne's pushback on Wall Street whining?
Yeah,
it's a pretty good video.
Really quick before we go to that, speaking of the Fed, shout out to Sam. He just sent a screenshot of Thomas Massey introducing and end the Fed bill.
Oh yeah, we did.
It happened?
We do this every year.
It's happening.
He put a poll on Twitter yesterday that was like, should I introduce and end the Fed bill? And it was like 90% yes, and like 9% show the results. so it was like 1% no.
Yeah. Federal Reserve Board Abolition Act, HR. Heyo, 8421.
Yeah.
House Resolution us.
So
stocks on.
Sorry.
Let's see it happen.
Yeah. So here's Charles Payne on Fox Business talking about the GameStonks.
January 11th or before. I've got the report in my hand that I sent out to my subscribers, and here's the list. The shorts, first of all of this nonsense, all of this noise, all of this whining by Wall Street, it's making me sick. 140% of GameStop was short. I didn't hear one person on TV complaining about Wall Street trying to crush GameStop. 140% short. I told my subscribers, buy this stock, and they made a fortune. I also told them to buy Virgin Space. Virgin, we took profits on that today. Fizz, that's up huge. Tangers is up huge. Neil, you can't allow Wall Street to short 75% of a stock, and nobody says anything. Crush these companies into the dirt, and then when the individual investor makes money, everyone's up in arms. Oh, they're going to lose their shirt. Don't you think people are trading? If it traded 80 billion shares today, people are ringing the register. I have a kid who bought a house. He made $50,000 and bought a house. So yes, some people are going to lose and some are going to win. But if they want to change the rules of the game now because the general public is making money after decades of the shorts crushing thousands of stocks into the dirt, I have watched stocks being crushed completely to zero, and no one ever whispered anything because those stocks didn't have Wall Street sponsorship. They were small names. Maybe they went public through a reverse takeover. Whatever it was, the shorts have had their way with the market for decades. No one's ever complained about it. So I am thrilled. If you are going to try to destroy a company by shorting 140% of its stock, you have to accept the fact that individual investors are playing the same game that you're playing, and now you're losing.
Oof.
Yeah. Well said.
Oof. and I love like his flip on the head of like the condescension of like the everyman who's like, they can't possibly know that this is the right thing to do. They're too dumb. That's what. Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, for those that might just be listening, this is showing just a dramatic chart here. The first one that was up showed GameStop up 1,500%.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, it's
some people will lose their shirt on this. I'm sure.
Yeah, don't buy the top
because a lot of people buy the top, right? Like it's 50% down from the top right now, but it went up however many hundreds of percent, from in a 48-hour period. And that's where a lot of people end up, and it's the same thing with the crypto markets, right? Where you end up having all these people come in and they're not paying attention in the bear market for what's good and what are good investments. And then they start to see everybody is making money, and then they're like, I'm going to buy Dogecoin at 69 cents. And it was like, no, that should probably be where you're selling. Right?
Because the nerds are selling at 69 cents.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's the same thing, like everything's super frothy, and you're not buying Bitcoin at the bottom where everybody went to jail, which was at like where it went down to 16,000, and everybody is like, I'm going to buy it at however high it goes in a year from now, because it's probably going to go higher from here in a year from now, just assuming normal market trends. And so they'll be like, oh, everybody's making money on this Bitcoin thing, I want to get in on it now. And then they buy the literally tippy top, right? And then crashes down.
Yep. You're the one that's left holding the bags.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So to reiterate, none of this is financial advice, and do your own research, and don't buy the top.
Yeah. Don't be chasing narratives. If you're chasing narratives, you're probably late.
Oh, for sure.
That's really the big message, I think. Don't be dumb.
What's the old adage? Buy the rumor, sell the news.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing it on the news, you're too late.
So Joe,
yes,
you're going to the LNC.
I am.
What's the LNC?
The LNC is a Libertarian National Convention, and I'm pretty excited about it. So
1776 will commence again.
Indeed, it will. My triumphant return to D.C., Washington, D.C., for the first time since I was 8 years old, when I lived there long ago. Through some prodding from Bennett, some encouragement from Bennett, who said, hey, we should go to this. Someone should go to this. I decided, heck, why not? My dear brother Sam, our meme lord in chief, will be a delegate from the state of Washington. And our friend Liam McCullum will be a delegate from the state of Montana. So we are going to go and experience what I think will be a really important moment for the Libertarian Party, but also just in American politics this year. We're going to capture some media. We're going to try to get some interviews with all of the great people that are going to be there. A list that's growing larger by the day, but already includes President Trump, who will give an address, Vivek, who will be debating the Libertarian Party vice presidential nominee. Thomas Massey is supposed to be doing some sort of meet and greet as well surrounding his End the Fed bill, which I think he was supposed to introduce on the floor just prior to the convention, but maybe it's already happened. Seems like it might have already happened. Tulsi Gabbard should be there. Dave Smith, of course, who is sort of like the torch bearer for the LP.
He's Mr. Libertarian.
Will be there, and he'll be speaking a couple of times. RFK Jr. will be there. Peter McCullough, clinician who rose to fame probably against his will during the COVID era. It should be a really interesting time, so I'm excited for it. Howard Dean, however, will not be there.
Unfortunate.
That I'm aware of, maybe.
It's going to be interesting. Like, it's just looking at all of these people and how much this kind of movement, this broader movement outside of just the libertarians, are paying attention to it.
Is this a selection bias thing? Is it because more of the libertarian philosophical oriented people are paying more attention to the Libertarian Party, or is it the general public is paying more attention?
I don't think it's so much the general public. It's more so this big tent nature of things, of these different factions, these different kind of groups that are in a similar enough ethos that they're kind of forming together, right, in some capacity. And I think that formation is going to continue to grow, right? And this is just showcasing, like, all these people, they feel like they need to vie for attention from this select group, or they need to win their votes, or they need to whatever. And there's a common enough interest that exists there. That is the interesting aspect to me.
I think there are two important pieces of this. More than that, but two I'll point at are, one, I think a really, really shrewd move by the LNC chair, Angela McArdle, to invite these people from outside of the party to join the conference, the convention, to bring more relevant voices to it, to put focus on the LP. That's going to raise brand awareness more broadly, even just by passive means. And secondly, I do think that it represents a bit of a courtship of the LP by these more influential political players who see the relevance of the party growing, who want to get on this team, who want to incorporate this part of American political culture into their movement. So there's a bit of dynamic there where I think it shows that the LP's stock is rising.
It does actually, and bringing this to Trump, it does remind me of Reagan in a lot of ways, where the Reagan administration and kind of the people around it, like the influential forces around it, was a very broad right-wing movement at the time. And also remembering he had a landslide too. There's also a thought there that existed. Like he won almost every state, but there was a very broad tent, I guess you would say, of people that were kind of influential within the Reagan movement. Everybody from like Milton Friedman to like kind of
George Bush,
neocon types. Yeah, George Bush. Like it was very spread, which I think is something that might be seeing here with the Trump stuff, right? And this is a courtship in a sense, or a place for all those people to gather at.
Yeah, at least for that faction of it, right? Yeah, because that's the question: is to what degree is Trump, as he's building this out, as he picks his VP, as he builds a cabinet, all the things around that, is he going to have Chris Christie do it again, or is it going to be somebody else? Is it going to be people from AEI, or is it going to be people from the Mises Institute and Cato? Right?
Yeah. When you're looking at the people that are at his rallies and are speakers at the rallies, that should be a good indicator of the people he's planning to have around him, which is very different than 2016, right? And a lot of it partially to Trump's credit, but also partially one of the problems that was of Trump, he just didn't know a lot of the people. He didn't know the figures, right? He didn't know who to put around him at the time. And this, I think, shows a stronger indication of, I think, a little bit more of a positive direction that Trump is going to be taking in the staffing decisions around him.
I could see that. Do you think that, because obviously there's a vote right now going on the LP convention website that's allowing people who are already like ticket holders and delegates to cast votes. You can also just pay to cast a vote for the questions that Trump will be asked. And I can pull those up. But do you think that this is going to be Trump paying lip service or actually authentically trying to bring libertarians into his coalition?
I think those are both similar things, right?
Well, earnestly bring people into coalition. Does he really mean
it when he says things?
Does he really care?
Does this man really mean it?
This is a really great question. I don't know what's going on.
To what degree
I know words. I have the best words.
I don't know what's going on between his ears.
Because one of the areas for challenges from the libertarian crowd is going to be the COVID time period. But also, a lot of libertarians weren't good on the COVID time period either. Like it was the Mises Caucus types that were good on it. Yeah. Like a lot of the other ones, also a lot of the libertarian types weren't good on Ukraine either. There were certain factions of libertarians that were good on it, but there was also a lot of factions that weren't.
To be clear, Trump wasn't good on Ukraine either.
Yeah. Much better than like
until now he is.
People,
but
right?
Well, wait a minute, hold on. Whatever. The point being is that there isn't a clear matchup on a couple issues, and how much will that be wedge? How much will he kind of try to move past it? How much will he even be aware of those wedges? I don't know. I don't think so. I think
the awareness aspect is an interesting thing. How aware is he?
And it's just like every other rally he's ever been to. He just assumes everyone loves him, and he's going to tick some libertarians off.
One of the things that I think will be funny is just like, that's why we needed to lower interest rates, and libertarians would be like, huh? Boo?
Right? Like, I want that, but also no.
They'll be like, no. Because they'll probably just be a thing, like riff on the Fed a little bit, and he'll be like, he'll riff on the Fed, and it's going to offend a lot of libertarians. because that's an area he wasn't great on. Right?
I mean, I think if he's smart, if people around him are smart, they'll pick on the issues where he is strong with libertarians. He'll talk a lot about his foreign policy, right?
If he goes in and talks about Syria and talks about things like that, then he'll have a great opportunity, I think. Yeah, if he goes in and he says, I don't know.
Depends how he talks about Syria, because he did do the bombing of the airstrip, and there's a lot of, things like that.
But if he's like, well, we didn't need to go to Syria, we didn't need to do all these Hillary Clinton things, or he talks about how he was betrayed by the deep state, that sort of stuff will play well.
Exactly.
But if he talks about, especially in his framing, right? If he talks about, we would never have had the invasion of Russia, Ukraine, if I was president, that sort of thing, even though he was the one who sold the weapons to Ukraine and actually put that in the situation.
One thing that I think is an easy win for him at this event is to speak to the Ross Ulbright issue, right? Where this is the gentleman who started the Silk Road website, right? Where you
also Julian Assange would be another one too.
True. But he started Silk Road, which is the infamous dark web website where you could go and buy drugs online with Bitcoin or anything for that matter. The kid who was like just a kid at the time and still is, I think he's still in his 20s, was given multiple life sentences.
He's like late 30s now.
Is he 30? Okay. Yeah. Well, it's been a while, I suppose. In prison currently and will be for the rest of his life, unless he's pardoned. right? And so I think the win for Trump here is to say to this audience who obviously vehemently disagrees with that sentence for a nonviolent crime, that he would pardon him if he were elected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ross got something like 200 years.
Yeah, it was insane. It was a multiple life sentence.
It was a double life sentence. Yeah.
Ghislaine Maxwell got 20 years.
Yeah.
This guy got 2 life sentences.
Sam Bankman-Fried, like 20 or something.
25.
Like that, right? 25.
Don't be noticing.
Don't be noticing.
Stop noticing.
There was something else recently where I was like, wow, that was a low sentence. I can't remember what it was, but another big thing.
Yeah, the ones here that have a lot of votes, actually, other is winning with the most votes, 19% of votes, which basically would just put the questions in the hands of Convention Oversight Committee. The ones that are winning otherwise are End the Fed with 13%, tied with Peace Not War, 13%, 12% Free Ross Ulbricht. And those are the main ones. No More Foreign Aid has 9%. Eliminate the federal income tax has 8%. So it should be an interesting conversation. I'll be really curious to see what he chooses to pick on, or if it's just sort of another rambly, rile him up campaign rally for him.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. I'm very curious.
Some of it though too is it's probably more interesting the other people that are there, because Trump is going to do the campaign rally thing, but I think what's more interesting is the Trumpers, like the acolytes of Trump, or like the Viveks of that. Like, they are much more the intellectual powerhouse types, and they're going to be involved in like panel discussions and debates and stuff like that. Like that's that in itself where I think the more substantive stuff will happen, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Angela McArdle in the interview with Liam where she was saying, don't be surprised if he like claims to be the most libertarian, like more libertarian than anyone there. And I'm like, yeah,
I'm the most
like,
libertarian. Milton Friedman didn't know nothing.
Remember in
never even saw liberty coming. I bought that stonk way before.
Remember in 2016, a very clear strategic move that he made was to try to out libertarian Rand Paul very early on, because like the Ron Paul people largely, like there was a large Ron Paul swell that moved towards Trump and not towards Rand early on. And when Rand had a ton of name recognition and buzz really early into the campaign until Trump came in, like Rand Paul looked like he could have been the president before Trump entered that race. And then he completely undercut
Rand Paul. No announcement of that yet.
Yeah, I doubt that highly.
Why do you doubt that?
Oh, just it's a complicated relationship, I'm sure, between the Republican libertarian types. And
we have Thomas Massey.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but he's
different.
kind of the exception.
Yeah, that's different.
The House is a very different place than the Senate.
Yeah.
You have to play a very different game in the House. You can hide in the House. You can't hide in the Senate.
No.
Interesting.
More people in the House, too.
Indeed.
More power. Senate.
Indeed. Well, I would encourage anybody listening to this who wants to have some sort of input into who we try to talk to, what we ask them, please join the Discord. We're going to be carrying on the conversation there. I'll be fielding questions from the Discord community and asking those whenever we get the opportunity to. Whatever you want is what we're going to cover. I'm there for you. So please do jump in there. And also, while you're doing that, like and subscribe on YouTube. We'll be publishing, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to do some sort of live event, maybe on YouTube. So stay tuned for all that stuff.
Something that's worth maybe adding to put a bow on this too, on the influence of this within kind of the dissident right populist folks, right, is Tucker just had Dave Smith on yesterday.
True.
And they spent like 10 minutes talking about the Libertarian National Convention. So it shows, that's one of those things where it shows kind of like this matters within this group of people, and it's broader than just like this fringe libertarian movement, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's
I mean,
much broader than that.
I think it's irresponsible to call libertarians fringe anymore. I mean, it's the longest standing, most substantial third party in American politics. I don't think it's fringe at all. The thing that makes it fringe is some of the fringe characters that attach themselves to the movement that get all the press because they're the vermin supremes, and they are just really compelling, interesting, strange characters, and also good characters with which to marginalize broader libertarians, right?
And also just like the lack of any game theoretical understanding of operating within politics that has existed within libertarians for decades, right? Like now there actually seems to be like, okay, here's how we can make actual influential moves in politics despite our size.
Yes.
Right. And that's what's interesting about it.
And they're fringe in part because they're very small.
True.
In the comparison of not just vote totals, but amount of money they wield. right? So if you raise,
Help me, I'm poor.
yeah, if you raise a full tens of millions, and the other parties are raising $1 billion annual.
They're involved where energy is now.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what matters.
That's what
like,
it's
where is the energy? And the energy right now is, I mean, largely Trump has most of all the energy in the country, right? Like he's just that figure. But also a lot of energy with folks like RFK, with folks like Vivek, like, and those people with all that energy are coming here, and now the libertarians are part of the discussion.
Absolutely.
For the first time ever.
Absolutely. And I think just to put another bow on it.
A lot of bows on this one.
A lot of bows on this one. You mentioned, the libertarians don't raise a lot of money, and that's true. Why? Well, they don't get a lot of lobbyist money because the philosophy itself is antithetical to allowing big government to do you favors. So, of course, nobody with a lot of money who they want to throw around to, get those kickbacks from government, they're not going to support that. They want to be able to get influence, and you don't get that as much through the LP.
Well,
so
there's
for
no reason to
individuals,
give them money because they're so uninspiring up until recently.
I think that may also be the case, but that tide is turning.
Yeah, and actually that's true in the sense of like there is a quid pro quo that's implied. That's sometimes in those sorts of things. But
for
the
people
larger one is access, not quid pro quo, right? Meaning you will take my call, right? You can't actually ask for quid pro quo. That's illegal, right?
Well,
so
okay.
I think there's plenty. I think Walmart PAC would give to LP if they were at all within margin, right? If this was a 30-30-30 race, and that's where it was at with 10% undecided, there would be no hesitation from corporate donors, bundlers, people like that to give to the LP if it gave them access to a candidate if they won. Because if you notice, some of the biggest, largest donors to all these things, tech, oil, all those like ish, play both sides.
Well, of course they do. That's part of the game.
Also,
but I would think I would ask you within margin of what? Yes, if you're saying the LP needs to be within striking distance of getting a candidate in the White House.
Yeah,
not going to happen in our lifetimes, probably without some enormous sea change. But within margin of affecting the outcome of an election because they're throwing their small but significant, voter base towards a particular candidate for whatever reason. That's a different story.
Yeah, but that's not why people give money to campaigns, not to throw an election, but rather because they don't know which way they're going to throw it. And that's always been the debate that there's never a stable answer for.
Well, yeah, and they want the access of the person who wins the campaign.
Yes, that's
regardless.
Totally
because the power is not in the person that runs, but the person who wins. Right.
Quite true.
But although where the libertarians can have power is that they can actually influence probably long-term trends by inspiring people to certain ideas. And those ideas can then spread outside of this like small niche group. Like I'm very happy with the Libertarian Party acting much more like a PAC in a sense, but through a party apparatus where it has that function of having some sort of influence on changing people's minds about various topics. And then that influence change that happens then influences candidates / politicians on what policies they make, what bills they introduce. Right. Because it's like, well, we have all these people that really believe in this issue, and if I don't have this, then they're going to throw their vote away on whatever else, that's what matters.
Yep.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely. Well, it'll be an interesting time, and we encourage you to tune in, and also follow us on X. We are now posting some videos to X that are getting some great traction. So at Human Reaction PC on X, follow us there for all the updates.
And then finalizing here,
last story of
gamers continue to rise up.
Gamers still rising up.
Still rising.
Still getting out of those comfy chairs that they all have.
They're not that comfortable.
Are they not? Why do you have a racing seat? Yeah, racing seats are not comfy.
They're terrible.
Why do you sit in those?
I don't.
I don't use one of those.
Bennett, you have one.
I use a normal office chair.
Why do you like it?
I don't.
He does it for the look. So the ladies come over like, oh, he's a gamer.
Wow, his computer has rainbow colors and he has a racing chair.
I don't have that.
I do have the RGB, nice computer.
I don't have
like
that.
it's a nice computer.
I also use a console. I don't do PC.
He's not a gamer.
He's not a real gamer.
So Assassin's Creed. Sorry, we got some tweets. This is going to be a kind of a quick flow through because we've kind of told the story a couple different times, but I want to keep touching on this because I think what happens is a time slice problem, right? Of like tracking a story over time is very difficult, and so I think by returning to this on a regular basis, when ESG becomes a topic again, there'll be a clear mental model about what's going on. for the people who listen to us. That is so weird, Kyle. Every time you bring it up, it's a different color.
Yep, I know. I don't know what X is doing. My display settings are just crazy right now.
Figure it out, Elon.
I called it X, and so it loaded with the proper dark mode.
Except for this one.
You opened that one before. Oh no, there's this new one. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah, these are new. I just opened these like 5 seconds ago.
It has a mind of its own. It's the AI. It's Grok.
So this is the
its will.
story. And if you go to the first one there, just for a quick guide for me, it's reloading. Every time it's different.
It's every other.
So Ubisoft is a Canadian company, and it has. I think they also have a California.
Oh, they're all over the world.
Yeah,
they have companies
they have
everywhere.
like Singapore. Yeah.
Huge game development studio.
That's how a lot of these companies work. Is they have things in various different time zones, so people just pick up the work of the previous time zone and keep moving.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Wow, true 24-hour workforce.
Yeah, exactly.
So
terrifying.
We talked about how there was some indications that they had worked with a DI narrative writer and things like that back when we were talking about Sweet Baby Inc. They've since came out with their new video game on their long-standing series, very popular series, Assassin's Creed. And in that game, it's got this very interesting narrative arc about being somebody who gets into a machine and then can play through the memories of your ancestors to reveal things about the past.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about those games, and especially has been interesting, like for Bennett, is how it connects you with real history in a lot of ways. That's very interesting and helps people like contextualize history.
One of my favorite game series growing up. Like I felt like I learned a lot and learned about interesting figures because like it's a narrative around actual historical events and historical people.
We were talking about Machiavelli, and we're like the prince, and he was like, "Yeah, Machiavelli."
Yeah, he was in Assassin's Creed
like
too.
I knew who the Medicis were because of that game series.
Yeah, you're involved in all these things, and there's a broader kind of Illuminati conspiracy that's been going on for thousands of years around like these mystical objects, but it's like this war between the assassins and the Templars, like these two kind of fraternal orders that have existed in different pieces of history. And then you're going in and learning about your ancestors and what they had to deal with in that war because you're currently in that war too, kind of a thing. Like that's the premise of the game.
And so they've been doing this game all over the world, showing different timepieces, different cultures, different racial and ethnicity groups. They've done it in the Middle East. They've done it in Italy. They've done it in the Vikings.
Assassin's Creed 3 was the American Revolution.
They did. You play
as a Native American,
American person in that context with has excellent, awesome storytelling around slavery and the position of blacks and natives during the American Revolution. It's really awesome. I really love that game. And you've done it. We've done it in ancient Egypt. Correct.
That's where everything starts to go off the rails.
Yeah, ancient Egypt.
That's where it
play
lost
an
me.
African character. Correct.
Yeah, you're Egyptian.
Yeah, and there's some other games in this series. What happened with this one is they came out with new one. I want to click on the screenshot on that one. They introduced the character, and this is a real historical character named. Oh man, I might forget.
Yasuke, I believe it was.
Yeah, Yasuke. Could you go down a little bit on the? Yasuke. That's very good. So,
which I think is the first time they've also done that. Like from what I know, I've only played like the main console games. Every character that you play is not an actual historical character. You're just surrounded by them.
Yeah.
Like your character is fictional.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't really know why they went with a real one.
That's a good point.
This one
there is a reason. I will tell you why they went.
Like it's trying to fit.
That is a good point. I never thought about that. Yeah, you're always playing a fictional character in a historical time period. Yeah.
So in this case, and part of the reason why they can do that is because Yasuke is like a historical footnote that is completely irrelevant to Japanese history, right? So in the Italian game, you play a character right next to some of the most major characters in Italian history, right? And you're kind of weaving in and out of their real stories, like Da Vinci and Machiavelli and all these characters.
Yeah.
When you're in the very first game, you're playing around the people who make up the Crusades in a very important way.
Yeah, you're in Jerusalem in the first game.
So those sorts of stories and around them. In this one, they bring in this character who's a historical footnote, who was a slave who got brought to Japan and then was seen as like kind of like a very interesting person because he was a very tall, very strong man who was black, who lived in Japan for a time and was functionally a slave there. He became a servant of a Japanese leader after he was requested to become a servant, and that's about the whole story. And at one point, they might have dressed him in samurai armor, and it might have been either a joke or he might have gotten to carry around a sword for actual samurai.
Because I had heard about this guy before. I'd never really dug into him. Like years ago, I read about this guy, and I thought that he was like an actual black samurai. Is that not actually true?
That is a woke reinterpretation of it, right? Because what they find is this evidence of a black man in samurai armor. It's like, and there's like this need for but black people can be samurais too, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like fictionalizing that need. What's that cartoon from the 90s that did such an awesome job?
Samurai Jack?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
of. It was actually a way more adult than Samurai Jack. That's a black samurai. It's about a sword. I
don't know.
The controversy around this is, well, what about the Asian man? Because the two characters it introduces is a black guy to play as a samurai and a Chinese woman or Asian woman to play as.
I hope she's Japanese, for the love of God.
Yeah, Japanese. Probably Japanese. It would be even more controversial if she's Chinese.
Yeah.
So you get to look at the meme, and this is the kind of the sentiment is the next tab here, Kyle. Is how do Americans treat Japanese people in games versus how American people are treated in Japanese games? Right, and so it shows the guy from The Office.
The black guy from The Office. What is his name? Do we know his name?
I don't remember his name.
He's dressed up in like a samurai costume.
Corny samurai costume.
Versus some like very emo looking but svelte
I think that's
white guy.
Resident Evil.
Resident Evil. But the Japanese very often honor a lot of American whites in their games. They treat them like regular characters. They focus on storytelling, etc. But we kind of tokenize and then actually erase Asian men from Asian stories. Now, IGN put out a story today actually trying to kind of justify this decision from Ubisoft. Basically, their case on the other side of this argument is, well, look at here. There's lots of stories of Japanese, samurai, and we haven't got this a story of another person who is not a Japanese samurai. The question is, what are we doing, right? You have fictionalized stories of fictionalized and real life Japanese samurai, right? You can play all kinds of games of Japanese samurai.
Yeah,
but we don't have one of black.
Like this Ghost of Tsushima or whatever it was called. It was a very big hit. Like
it was unbelievable.
That embodied a lot of Japanese culture. Yeah,
it was so good.
So I never played it. But
he makes the case that
recommend.
That it's a better business decision to have a black samurai because it's more novel. Right, we don't need. We're all full up on his quota, and he's an Asian man, so he has.
Yeah, I did. I was reading this earlier.
Of that, and so he's kind of making the case there. Now, the problem with that is, what is Assassin's Creed? It's meant to be historical fiction, right? That's based in real history that you play around and weave this fictional narrative into. Right, that makes it what it is.
Yeah.
And so by taking Yasuke, who is a historical footnote, and making him a main character and putting him into this kind of position, you're tokenizing him. You're making him less of a character because you have to take someone who was largely not a real, not an actual black samurai, and make him into a black samurai to make him into something substantive, rather than just allowing an Asian person to have their place in the Ubisoft Assassin's Creed lexicon as actually part of their actual history.
He also very easily could have been added to the game as like a side character, almost as a footnote, as he is kind of in history.
Like, would have been cool to be like part of, like, I don't know what the baseline plot line of this game is, but like part of whatever assassin order it gets put in there as being like a main, like a side character, like and that would be part of that, right?
Yeah, and then you could actually learn about the real Yasuke rather than a fictionalized version of him.
Yeah, that probably would be just better.
Additionally, imagine you're an assassin and you're the only black man in Japan. How functional of an assassin are you going to be? You're literally...
There he is, get him. Well, although that being said,
find anyone looks suspicious around here, and you got a 6'6" black guy amongst all these Asian people. Like, come on.
Although that being said, there's a bit of a suspension of belief in all of the Assassin's Creed games, where it's just like there's a bunch of normal people, and then you're just the one dude in a hood with sword strapped to him, just blending into the crowd.
Yeah,
right?
Real subtle. What is the feedback been from like black gamers
It's a mixture, right? So you get like the more woke folks who are one way. You got we've got a great video argument to react to actually on the next one here, and it's from an African American gamer. Yeah,
this one right here,
talking about exactly this and kind of seeing how we unevenly enforce this kind of rules.
So we got our first look at the new Assassin's Creed game, and I gotta say, man, I'm not impressed. I'm actually just really annoyed right now. We have two main protagonists, one female, one male, just like Odyssey. We're gonna be using Neo. I hope I said that right. A female Japanese character. And for the male character, they're going to be using Yasuke. Now, I'm annoyed because they're using Yasuke, and I'm going to tell you why. Yasuke is what they want to say is the first black Japanese samurai, when in all actuality, he was not even a samurai. He was a retainer, so he wasn't even a full-blown samurai. And for all of the characters they could have used for Japan, all these kind of different people they could have picked from, they picked Yasuke. Why do they pick Yasuke? Because he's black. So in context, that doesn't matter to me, because in all the Assassin's Creed games, every single character has been of some kind of different race and nationality, so that doesn't matter to me. That's fine. But you have to understand what day and age we're in. You have to understand the kind of social shit that they want to try to get across in these video games now. So instead of using a Japanese man in a game based in Japan, like they did with the other Assassin's Creed games, Altair, he was an Arab, obviously. One of my favorites, Connor, in Assassin's Creed 3, he was Native American. That was fine. And the most famous of them all, Ezio Auditore, who was Italian. So why in all those games would you have a character representative of the region they're from? But in this game, you want to demote a Japanese man and then use Yasuke. I understand why. We know why. But they're not going to tell you why. Because if you call it out, you're some kind of ist or phobe or whatever. And since I'm black and I'm calling it out, that means that I must hate my skin or something. You know how they do. I just see this and my immediate thought is they did this for brownie points. I can't think of any other reason why you would have a Assassin's Creed game based in Japan, which we've been clamoring for since the beginning of Assassin's Creed, and then have the main protagonist that is a male be black. I see that and I'm like, there's no other reason than I want claps for it. There's no other reason. And I'm
we can stop it there, but yeah. I think that's the important thing, because like there has been a black assassin in the franchise before, but it made sense because he was African.
In Africa.
Like in Africa. Right?
That makes sense.
And historically, that's where most of the black people were. So this guy is the creator here.
You don't say that.
The creator here, I want to give him credit, is named Kada and Kali Too Short on Twitter if you want to find him. But yeah, I didn't want to use his content without giving him some credit for it. But that's exactly the way that I think, anyone who's not looking at this like, okay, I need to make sure Ubisoft, the international corporation, feels can do everything they want to do, who's just looking at it from like a common sense and like, I want to engage with my culture to make sure that blacks aren't tokenized and turned into a way to checkbox things rather than tell authentic stories about. That's how these cultural issues are breaking down.
There's an interesting thing there too, because like the games, like if you look at the entire franchise as a whole, there's so much representation that actually exists as a whole. But like, why do you need to have equal representation within a single game when you already have massive amounts of diversity across and kind of attributing to varying different cultures across a whole series of like the 20 some games that they have in this franchise, right?
And dealing with really profound religious, ethical, and philosophical controversy in these games, right? And that's the thing that drives me crazy. Like if you play the old one, I'm still like an OG. The Altair first couple, first one. That's what I meant.
That's the only one.
The first game. It itself is dealing with like, stereotypes of Islam, stereotypes of early Christianity and things like that in the game as you play it.
Well,
and
it even
had like a disclosure about the front, about the Crusades and about how they were savage and terrible. But this is the reality of the people who live there, right? And, like you take that company and somehow they wind up to this place over that time. That is the degradation of DEI, ESG, and the perverse incentives of it. You take that company and you turn them into this.
Is there any evidence of a Sweet Baby Ray's getting involved here?
So what we do have is the historian on staff is very woke. So this is one of the great things about this moment, right? Is that everyone is so out with their public personality. Like you can just find their Twitter and they're telling you everything they believe. So the IGN, and then obviously this person's actual published works. Their only like published works for the masters was transgenerational sex in her work Tales of Idolized Boys in Japan. Basically, she wrote a breakdown of how like the kind of assistant like priests that would be part of a family of rich noblemen in Japan were gay, and how that it basically it's this typical thing that we do in history right now for woke history is to go back, look for anything that could be gay, and be like, people are super gay back then, guys. I'm telling you.
Look, this is the same type of stuff that happened in Athens.
Wasn't
too.
it also about them
dynamic,
not
but
even them being gay, but them sleeping with like younger guys.
Oh, and pedophilic, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
once again, and it's celebrated, but it's not celebrated on the pedophilic grounds, but on the gay grounds, right? And they're like, wait, what are we doing here? Like, this is you are celebrating this.
They were minor attracted persons.
It's always been a term.
But that's the thing is like it's not telling history to learn from it. It's telling history to work backwards your dogmatic point that you want to make about how important homosexuals were in the history of the world, right? Because they're kind of invisible because of all kinds of cultural biases and things like that. That's their case. The trick is that when you do that to a game, to the public, like that's fine for your niche culture pop legacy article in feminism.com, right? But when you do that to the gaming community, they're like, bro, I don't care about that. What I want to do is I want to play an Assassin's Creed game, and we don't do that here. Does that make sense? And that's where we're at.
Yeah.
And so they hired this person. So it's just like this, just misalignment, not understanding their own audience again.
Yikes. Do you think that is it just trying to impress their own cultural worldview onto every facet of culture? Or are they really trying to like indoctrinate and bring gamers into this way of thinking?
I think there's a mixture of that. Because whenever you're part of a culture, like there ends up being resistant to outside ideas that happen, and you have these types of people that are kind of embedded in that culture. They all hang out together. It's not very different than like the DC culture in politics, right? Where people go to DC and they get embedded in the culture, and then their views start to change, and they start to, because like, well, you don't get invited to that cocktail party if you're like a listener of Tucker Carlson or something. You have the same type of vibe shift that ends up happening with all these industries, right?
Yeah.
But then there is people that actually do want to we want to push things on kids so that they move more towards my direction. Like that does happen as well, right? So like there's a mixture of all that.
Yeah. And you have very overt efforts to do that. Like gamers are dead is like a very common, idea that happens in gaming journalism.
What does that mean?
We talked about this with the Gamergate 1.0 some weeks ago, right? Where it was like the gamer, the white straight male are no longer the target demographic of gaming. Like they said this in 2014. Obviously false, and still false to this day, right? It's the number one entertainment industry in the world, still dominated by white heterosexual males.
We should also mention that we're not just bashing on this without evidence. Like this was not the original story.
Yes,
they totally
that's right.
changed it.
Yes, if you go to the very first Grooms tweet. So Grooms, you got to understand this guy that we're using as the part of the source here. He is a former developer
at
Blizzard.
Activision Blizzard. Yeah.
And that
on World of Warcraft.
He got sources within Ubisoft that's saying that this is a DEI change, very specifically created to change their score. And what he doesn't connect it to is ESG, is like the financialization of this, but this is an effort to change the story to better serve a social agenda and the financial benefits of that social agenda. So remember we talked about hiring more programmers or change your story? This is the example of it.
Question: is there a public record of ESG scores for companies?
Yeah.
Can we look these up? Because I'd like to know.
Ubisoft?
Yeah, I'd like to know. Just more broadly, when companies do things, can we track the results of a particular action to an increase or a decrease in their ESG score?
One thing that'd be difficult to know in this case is we don't know when exactly this change happened. It changed before, but the development timeline of a video game is so long, it would be hard to suggest when that is versus when
and
actually assessed.
let's also not forget, we talked about this last time, but the Star Wars Outlaws, where they made the girl main character pretty ugly and stuff, that's another Ubisoft game.
Yeah.
Ubisoft is they're everywhere.
Yeah.
They have their hand in a lot of things. Their ESG rating is very low risk right now, according to this.
So I assume that's good.
Yeah. They're low risk.
Yeah.
They rank 99 out of software and service companies. They're
in the top 10%.
Yeah, they're 99 out of over 1,000. And then global rating, they're 2,000 out of 16,000 in universal ratings. So
interesting.
And what's interesting here is we actually have even better paper trail because someone put out some of the DEI emails from within Ubisoft about how they do their kind of HR decisions in the DEI framework, which is Your bonus and review depend on how hard you DEI. That's just how Grooms put it. DEI officers are installed in every development team to ensure the message.
Oh,
right.
The narrative
of all AAA studios out there. My dev friends and contacts who have come forth tell me Ubisoft and Activision are the worst. And so it has, and he has a screenshot here of the equity and inclusion initiative at Activision.
Huh. So clearly, for game studios that hope to become large, like Activision and Ubisoft, this is sort of a prerequisite. You have to play ball if you want to attract investment from the large players that are paying attention to these scores.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was the big thing too, because Activision being the worst too, Activision Blizzard, who is where Grums is formerly employed at, because that's like World of Warcraft, the Warcraft franchise, StarCraft, those big games.
Do they
it's pretty
Call of Duty too?
Activision does have Call of Duty now. Yeah. They have this, there's a reputation that Blizzard has fallen apart, and there's always kind of, this new company is the next Blizzard, right? Like they're what Blizzard used to be, which is what everybody loved. Everybody loved Blizzard at one point, and there was kind of a rich culture that existed around their games. And then they went through a string of, they would like this is what shows how crazy this environment is. In America, they're really concerned about the DEI stuff. They're like, make sure that we have black characters in the games and all this stuff. But then in the Chinese market, which they have a massive market in, they remove the Chinese characters, or they remove the black characters from the games.
Right.
That type of stuff.
Right.
And then they end up having, well, apparently in their culture, they have this massive sexual harassment scandal that ends up spreading throughout the entire company. And to the point where you had execs at the company at their BlizzCon events, they would have like they would have what they called a Bill Cosby room, right?
They called it that?
Yeah, they called it that. And they had a picture of Bill Cosby in the room.
Jesus.
Symbolism.
To the point where...
That's not symbolism. That's a reference.
That's pretty overt.
That's pretty overt. To the point where Bobby Kotick got the CEO, who... been to Epstein's Island. Very strange dynamics there. He got ousted, and they've done, Microsoft bought them to the point where Microsoft's gaming industry is becoming so big that the U.S. government was wanting to crack down with antitrust laws. But it's very widespread, and especially when we're talking about finance markets, when we're talking about DEI, when we're talking about all these things, all these stuff start to kind of pile in together, right? You start to, the pervasiveness of culture and influencing young people, because video games are kind of the new way of storytelling for young people, because pretty much everybody plays video games now, that if you're young.
And you wouldn't want a kid to learn real history. You would want them to learn your version of history. Right.
Yeah.
I think there's a conspiracy out there so that you don't know that there was a black samurai.
Whoa.
Right.
Yeah, but it just shows like the hypocrisy that these companies have when it comes to the DEI standards. It's just there's so many different variables that exist here where like people are just, I just want to play my video game. I just want a good game, man. I just want a good game.
All I wanted to do was play video games and be left alone.
Yeah, and I feel like they've really been lacking the last few years, and it's like kind of killing me because I fucking love video games.
Yeah. Like I would prefer playing a video game over watching a movie.
Yeah,
like and getting my storytelling through it, because it's much more actively engaged. It's strategic thinking. There's like cognitive elements to it that's much more than just kind of vegging out watching a movie. Right?
Joe's judging you so hard right now.
I'm not.
Get outside. Go touch grass. You loser.
I was thinking, you know where there isn't DEI? Like when you're standing in a river and there's no one around you.
True.
True. And the question is it this?
But they're turning the frickin' frogs gay.
Yeah.
And they're turning the sky gay too. See those northern lights? Great meme, by the way. Did you post that?
Yeah, I did.
That was good.
So the only last question I have for this, and I do think I want to note this for the ESG DEI aware people, is the degree to which this is actually an intentional blowback. The action is in the reaction. So if you're a promotional person and you know you're about to drop a game that has going to cost between $70 and $120 for a single player game that has a included seasonal pass for $17 a month, is that right?
Yeah,
$18 a month, something like that?
It was, yeah.
And you're like, no one wants this. I know gamers are going to hate this. So what we're going to do is we're going to rechange the characters, and we're going to make one of the main characters black. And then when people are like, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's based in Japan. There's like one person in all Japan. And then you're like, yeah, you're a racist. You're a racist for pointing out that, it's wrong to have why can't black people be, samurais? therefore distract from the fact that you're charging an overpriced game and trying to slip by a assassin's greed.
Well,
that's
look,
the difference.
there's another element there too of just how inflation has affected video games. Like back in my day, the highest of the high video game was $50.
Yes.
And now we're at the point where in the last 2 years, the highest of the high AAA games are all listed at $70, right? And like, but then you also just have like great games like Baldur's Gate that just would be like $40. You know, it's like
Are video games in the CPI?
I don't know.
I doubt it.
I don't know.
I doubt it too. Look, if Tom Cruise can be a samurai, a black guy can be a samurai. Okay,
I was like, if that movie came out today, though, people would lose their fucking mind.
Yeah, that's anti-DEI. Your score's going down.
Doesn't Shogun have that FX?
Yeah,
documented mini like a.
I think there's. I've only
drama.
I haven't watched it, but I feel like I heard Rogan talking about how they have like a random black character in it.
But I mean, yeah, they can go there.
But also, it's all people of Asian descent, like 99% of it.
Yeah, sure. And they're trying to be historical, authentic, and that's what you're trying to do. If you're trying to tell just a fantasy story and there's a guy who's black samurai, no one cares, right? That's fine. Go ahead, have at it, right? But if you're trying to tell a historically accurate one, you can't. The people are going to be like, "Well, what are you doing? Are you telling me a false history for? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to manipulate me? Trying to make me think something?" Because we know if you control the history of the past, you control the narrative of the past, you control the future. So,
well, and there's also too, like when people want to play an Assassin's Creed, like they want the cultural influence of the place at the time. Like that's kind of the appeal of the Assassin's Creed franchise in their storytelling. Where it's like, if I'm playing Black Flag, I want a good pirate story. I want assassins mixed with pirates.
Yeah.
If I want,
to me, that's the best one.
Yeah,
by the way.
It probably was the peak, I think. If I want Assassin's Creed 3, I want American Revolution politics mixed in with my assassin and kind of Illuminati's conspiracy around it. Like that's what I want. And then mix in the cultures of the time there. If I want Japan, I want Japanese samurai, right? Like that's what I want for it.
It's just like such a wide range of history for feudal samurai Japan. Like you could pick like a range.
There's
of
so
like
many major
1,000 years.
There's so many major
probably.
figures you could put in there, right?
And it's the thing that is really sticking out to me is it's the first time they've used an actual historical figure as the character.
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way.
That's just like,
That's
why
interesting.
this one?
Mm-hmm. That is interesting. I never really thought about it.
Why this one?
Suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
It could be because they want to distract from the overpriced game.
Could be.
So that is a trust me, I'm lying thing. So keep that mental model going.
But also there is the element of like who's writing the historical narrative in there too. Like there is that cultural vibe shift that exists within in there, and just the ESG stuff, right? Yeah. Like they are low risk and they want to keep that score low risk. Right? That's just what it comes down to.
That's how you appease the Black Rock.
I mean, my last thing before we wrap it, and I've thought this for the last several Assassin's Creed games. Just let me customize the character. Then you don't have this. Just let the character be customizable.
Yeah.
There is an element for that type of game. Like I think that makes sense for certain games. I don't think it makes sense for other games. And I'm not sure about this game making sense.
No, it'll be like Need for Speed Underground 2, where you can like put a body kit on and like racing tattoos.
That was a great game.
Right?
That was a great game.
Yeah, you can select the visual appeal of your character, Bennett.
But that also makes more sense in America. Because like that is just like you are a racer in an America element.
It's also a car, not a person.
Yeah. So. But like where if you're having a story where the backstory actually matters of the character itself, you can't just be like, well, now he's Aztec. Like, you can't do that.
But if we did do that, we would have our first transmission character. Anyways, let's go ahead and wrap it there. We're at 2 hours, 15 minutes, even longer because we started the clock late. So
thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you watching. If you are a member, look out for our members only show, which we're going to record right now. We're going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs kicker's very inflammatory speech. We're going to talk about documentary filmmakers being debanked. King Chuckles revealing his devil portrait. These will be the stories we'll cover, and we appreciate you for supporting us. If you would like to become a member, humanreactionpod.com. Please do like, subscribe, follow, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. My name's Joe Sheehan. For David Rand, Kyle Mack, and Bennett, we will see you next time. Thank you.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com. And remember,
Kambuga shakamunda kunga kingo buga laka bluga blah 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 blah.